It being 6 o'clock, I will call this December 20th, 2021 meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board to order. Would you please rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so first up, we have our public service announcements.
So the first announcement we have is just legal notice, Town of Chelmsford, Spring 2022 Annual Town Meeting. The Town of Chelmsford will convene the 2022 Spring Town Meeting on Monday, April 25th. 2022 articles to be included on the warrant must be submitted in duplicate to the Office of the Town Manager at 50 Billerica Road prior to 4 p.m. on Monday, January 3rd, 2022. Any articles submitted after that time will not be considered by the Select Board for inclusion on the warrant. Petitioned articles submitted by private citizens must carry the signature of at least 10 or more certified voters in the Town of Chelmsford. For more information, please contact the Town Manager's office at 978-250-5202.
Thank you, Ken.
Our next public service announcement is a COVID booster clinic. This is December 28th, 2021 from 2 to 6 p.m. It's at the Chelmsford Town offices here in this building downstairs in the gymnasium. Currently, they're offering the Moderna booster. Registration is required. You can pre-register. And to get more information, you can follow the link at www.chelmsfordma.gov. Masks are required. The clinic is open to those 18 years and older. Bring your insurance card and your COVID vaccination card, and be sure to wear a short sleeve shirt.
Okay.
And the last one we have is flu season is ramping up. Over the last few weeks, the Chelmsford Board of Health has been seeing an increase in reported influenza cases. Mask up, lather up, and sleeve up. So please call the Chelmsford Board of Health at 978-250-5241 if you'd like to come into our office and receive a flu shot at no cost. And they have regular and high dose available.
Thank you, Ken. Our next agenda item is public input. Do we have anyone who would like to speak during public input? Just as a reminder, give your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Badri Upliappan, 5 George Lane. I'm also the chair of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. I wanted to take a few minutes to give an update on an agenda item that may come in this meeting or in future meetings, up to you. And one, of course, is the zoning laws, as well as the TCR status of the planning board zoning and the development agreement between Trammell Crow residential properties. So that subject matter gives some inputs here. Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee members and TCR, Trammell Crow residential representatives, had an opportunity to interact and understand TCR, which I shall use for short form for now, their thoughts and strategies to reach towards the net zero goal that Chelmsford adopted as a town resolution in spring of 2021. More discussions will happen in the coming months where both sides have actions. We already have, CAS has taken some actions to help TCR understand the status and what next steps could be done in this particular manner to achieve the net zero. It is important to note that this is an opportunity of collaborating with TCR is unique, both in the scale of the opportunities that the project provides for achieving net zero or going closer to the net zero standard, but it also has a lot of challenges. While Chelmsford looks towards creating policies and other appropriate measures in the form of bylaws, zoning requirements and guidelines that may be subject or derived from the best practices worldwide or from county, state, and federal laws as it may happen in the coming months to the years. It is imperative that we think that the Select Board look and continue to understand the potential impact of certain aspects of this development towards the net zero goal that we have set ourselves to. So having the ability to think about specific items that may or may not be covered here, and I may give some examples of this, at least what I have read in the initial zoning bylaw very quickly. To highlight, several of Massachusetts cities, as well as across the country, of course around the world, engaged cities and towns are taking whatever steps they can take today to begin with some aspects of electrification of their new housing stock, large, small, whichever it is, in a legal manner, in an appropriate framework, while meaningfully balancing retrofits for individual homes or a smaller scale pre-developed stock, and adopting advanced concepts for large, grounds-up, fresh developments, such as the TCR proposed build. CES hopes that that you select board will reiterate, underscore, anchor in discussions wherever the gaps that we are unable to write off the bat as we are forming and getting operationalized. That you will take the opportunity to ask a few more questions that are appropriate frameworks to reiterate the commitment that Chelmsford has made to reaching net zero, and convey the same for the need for collaboration by TCR as the project progresses, either through the development agreement or through the reaching out to the planning board for zoning amendments and stuff. We too shall do so, but in effort, reiterate those commitments or requirements to be able to collaborate with us as well as the town of Chelmsford to reach this net zero goal in the long term, and actually be a sort of help the process in being a community champion to make this development a successful model of private-public townspeople collaboration in a model for sustainable development. So that's input. Certain towns that we are looking at in terms of zoning bylaws and other things are Somerville, Boston, Amherst. They've all adopted either building standards for new building stocks, or zoning strategies are coming along in different parts of the state itself that are modeled, and that's also being championed by the MAPC, also has given us some guidance, and we're going through that. This project obviously is a 2-year run, at least by the time it comes out. However, I just wanted to reiterate that if there are certain gaps, in one of the items that I personally just went through it, and we still have to have some more discussions with the zoning law formation committee, the planning board, and others, is in the draft that's been published for the zoning. There's no requirements in generally for electrification, and more something around net zero, achieving net zero. So just a small gap. It may get resolved in time, it may not get resolved in time, but something that we will collaborate with TCR specifically and with the planning board to get there. But I just wanted to put this on the ground for select board to keep in consideration while you're mulling over this decision. But not just this decision, but any other decisions that may come up in the future. We'll try and get this, as an advisory group to the select board, we'll try and get this more formalized in the coming months. But as we kickstarted, and this was a big opportunity, I thought that as part of CES, we'll be trying to give you the guidance, but at least give you the opportunity to have this input to consider and keep it meanwhile while we get operational. Thank you.
Thank you, Badri. Would anyone else like to speak during public input?
I'm Claude Royal, and I live at 22 Augusta Way in Meadowood. And I've spoken and viewed my concerns about this project in the last 2 town meeting boards. And I kind of feel that the info from the public falls on deaf ears. And I spoke both times about the amount of sewerage that's going to be pumped into the ground from 800 people on this site. It's a small site. It's jammed full of buildings. The buildings are humongous. I don't believe it belongs in Chelmsford, at least on that site. You could on some remote site that could accept that type of a development. But I spoke last week about the sewerage, and the person representing Tamil Crow, after I spoke, got up, and the sewerage consultant made a statement based on some of the things that I said. And St. Andrew's Way is 10 to 15 feet above the elevation of this site. And I'm concerned of pollution, of the sewerage, the pollution, not tomorrow or the next day, but over a period of time, is going to seep down into Meadowood and also into Windermere. And in 8 or 10 years, we have a problem, and the developer is long gone. So the sewage consultant said, well, you don't have to worry about it. It's not going to flow to either Meadowood or to Windermere. It's going to flow to the Merrimack River. So I was sitting down with the president. I didn't feel it was an open thing where you could discuss between the consultants and so on. But when he made that statement that not to worry about, it's going to flow to the Merrimack River, well, the whole bottom of that site is wetlands from one end to the other. As a matter of fact, the road, the existing road encroaches on the website, on the wetland. So if all of this 16 million gallons of liquid into that ground in a year that's going to flow down towards the Merrimack River, how is it going to get across the wetlands? Isn't it going to pollute the wetlands on the way? So I still feel, I don't know where the board, the planning board stands on this or how they're going to vote on it. I guess it was left to leave it open for a week or some time up, maybe till the town meeting. And so I don't know what else to say. This is going to pollute the area. It's going to cause massive problems to the traffic on Princeton Way. You're going to have 800 people there, could be 1,200 cars going in and out of this site a day. I think you got a big problem. It's something that has to be well thought of, not pushed in 3 or 4 months like they're trying to do here. You know, I think this is something that has to be really looked at before an approval is given to Tamilcrow to build this site. I also said that if they do get an approval to build it, at some point, Chelmsford's going to have to put in a sewage system. So the roads going into that site should have all the piping for the sewerage installed in the roads, and it should be hooked up to the buildings with a bypass for the sewage to go to the facility that they plan on trying to treat it on site. And I know that when I mentioned development, that sewage system, and if it was the same as it was at the point, and he said yes. And I told him the point is not without problems. He says, I know. They do have problems. They're polluting the groundwater over in Littleton. So I think you have to look hard and long at this thing before you throw a stamp of approval on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak during public input? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone in the Zoom room either. Did you want to speak?
No.
Oh, you just, okay.
I'm going to keep my mouth shut for the first time.
I just saw your hand moving. I didn't know. Okay, then that takes us to committee vacancies.
So for committee vacancies, as of December 20th, 2021, the Art and Technology Education Fund is looking to fill 1 3-year term. Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has 1 unexpired 3-year term and 1 3-year term. The CCA Advisory Committee has 2 1-year terms. Center Village Master Plan has 1 1-year term. Commissions on Disabilities has 1 unexpired 3-year term. Community Action Program Committee has 3 1-year terms. Council on Aging has 1 unexpired 3-year term and 1 3-year terms. They also have 5 associate member positions. The Cultural Council has 2 3-year terms. Holiday Decorating Committee has 3 1-year terms. Parade Committee welcomes all applicants to 1-year terms that expire each July 31st. Public Celebrations Committee has 5 1-year terms. Tree Committee is looking to fill 1 unexpired 3-year term and 1 3-year term. If you're interested in serving on any town board or committee, please complete an online application on the town website. Or for more information, you can contact the town manager's office here at 50 Billerica Road, Chelmsford, Mass. Or you can email tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov or call on the phone 978-250-5202.
Thank you, Ken. And that brings us to the continued public hearing for the aggregate industries storage license. And I thought Jarrett Temple is on the Zoom room from Aggregate. Jarrett, is there anything you'd like to say before we get started?
No, you need me to walk through the changes that we've made to our application since the last time we met, or are you going to cover that?
Why don't you go ahead and summarize it?
Okay, real simple. We've amended our land license application to the State Fire Marshal's office, and we are now asking for, instead of 53,000 gallons of liquid asphalt storage, we're asking for 55,000 gallons of liquid asphalt storage, and we will keep our 18,000 gallons of light fuel oil the same. So we're asking for a net increase of 2,000 gallons to our land license.
Okay, any questions from the board? Okay, this is still an open public hearing. Do we have any comments from the public? I am not seeing any, so I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
No, to close the public
Oh,
hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Go ahead, Ken.
So I'll make a motion to amend the liquid asphalt license from 53,000 to 55,000 gallons.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Temple.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays to all.
Merry
You too.
Christmas.
Okay, that brings us to the renewal of the Class 2 auto dealer license. My understanding is we don't have any further documentation from A1 Auto, Paul?
No, that was why it was held from the previous board approval for the annual renewal. We're still awaiting certification of insurance. So at this point, the board has two options. One is to take no action, or the other would be to issue approval subject to the submission of those documents, necessary documents. If you choose no action, no approval, then, they would be without a license until the board acts and approves the license at an upcoming meeting, which at this point would be January 3rd, the earliest date.
So if December 31st comes around and they haven't submitted the paperwork, they're without a license, even if we do a conditional approval?
That's correct. Yeah, we would not release the license until the necessary documentation is submitted. Christina Bruce, who's been administering this, has repeatedly contacted the applicant, to inform them of this deficiency. And again, we were promised the documents would be submitted, and here we are this evening, they're still not submitted. So those are the choices the board has. So obviously, if they were to open on January 2nd, we would send the police department over and say, you've got to close down. You don't have a license to, for the sale of used vehicles.
I don't think we should take any action.
What?
I don't think we should take any.
I don't either. I wouldn't do them any favors. I mean, they've asked 100 times.
Only asked so many times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No action. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to agenda item number 7, which is the status of the planning board zoning article. This was put on the agenda at the request of the planning board to get an update on where they were in their process and whether or not we should proceed with trying to set up a special town meeting. And I see no one from the planning board in this meeting. So, I know many of us were at that meeting. I am not going to speak for them, so my suggestion would be we continue, and if someone from the planning board shows up, we can go back to that item. Anybody have a
that's okay. I mean, you know, if they were asked to be here, it's kind of disappointing that there's not somebody here.
I was under the impression that at least one person was going to be coming, so
Okay.
That's why they posted a meeting.
that's why they asked us to, yeah, and that's why they posted their own meeting notice, so. All right, so why don't we move on to the development agreement, which is agenda item number 8. And for the record, Board Member LaFave is recusing himself. So there's, we have 2 development agreements I noticed in the packet.
Yes.
Which is, I guess, a change from what we've been reviewing, so why don't we take the first one, which is the development agreement that we've
Well,
been,
could we know why there's 2?
yeah, I'm gonna ask,
Okay.
I wanna start with the first one, but go ahead, counsel, why don't you explain why there's 2?
So the second development agreement is a development agreement with the developer of the affordable housing portion of the site. And we've had a draft of this agreement for a while. It was, I wasn't sure it was going to be necessary for the board to execute this, but something did come up last Wednesday prior to the planning board hearing, and that is that the Department of Housing and Community Development actually issued draft guidelines of how it interprets and intends to apply the housing choice legislation. And a couple of points that were noted on multiple occasions in these draft guidance documents was the issue of any draft bylaw needs to be to allow housing for families with children, and it cannot include a component that requires an age restriction. So now the bylaw as originally drafted didn't require an age restriction, so technically it could be considered to be consistent with the guidelines, but I think in an abundance of caution, it made more sense to take any reference to age restriction out of the bylaw and move it into a separate development agreement with this affordable housing developer. So that's why after the meeting on Wednesday and much discussion with counsel for Trammell Crow, we decided that it made more sense to move forward and actually push getting this development agreement executed along with the Trammell Crow development agreement.
Does that answer your question?
So we can have it in a development agreement, just not in a zoning? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And they're okay with us, with it being in a development agreement?
Well, I think that it would probably be good to get some confirmation from DHCD on that issue. I know that at the beginning of this process, counsel for Trammell Crow had indicated that they had previously had discussions with DHCD, and DHCD was comfortable with that type of an arrangement. Given the stringent nature of these proposed draft guidelines, I would certainly like the ability to follow up and confirm that.
Okay, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be wise.
Do we want to just finish the discussion out on that one as long as we're on it, or is there any, I see David Hedison is also here. So I guess, Paul, one question I had is this would be I'm going to go to the second one. This would be a development agreement that's also executed by the select board and not executed by choice?
It would be executed by Stafford or SCG Development Partners LLC and the Select Board,
Okay,
so it wouldn't
but
necessarily.
by both.
Right. But Choice has an agreement with SCG Development Partners LLC.
Okay. And do you want to talk about the 2 comments that you made? One has to do with what happens if Stratford does not purchase the property, and the other is about the nonprofit clause.
Well, and I think that, yeah, this would need to be cross-referenced to the Trammell Crow agreement. So Trammell Crow has the agreement with SCG Partners to purchase this portion of the property. So as long as we're covered in the Trammell Crow development agreement, and I think that the language is in there that does cover us. I had this discussion with Attorney Robbins on Thursday. But we just want to make sure that we're covered in the Trammell Crow agreement if SCG doesn't go forward, because we want to make sure, no matter what, that there has to be some sort of an affordable housing development on this portion of the property. And so that's why we just want to cross-reference the Trammell Crow agreement and make sure that it's requiring this portion of the property to be, a affordable housing development.
Which it does currently.
Correct.
Right.
And that also ties to the changes to the draft zoning bylaw, because the draft zoning bylaw, instead of referencing now an age-restricted development, is going to reference an affordable housing development as currently drafted. So again, that's why we need to make sure we're executing this development agreement.
Paul, did
But
you?
what if a scenario where the bylaw was adopted by town meeting, and then, for whatever reason, Trammell Crow doesn't proceed with the development, and now we have a bylaw in the
Well,
books?
so I also had that discussion with Attorney Robbins on Thursday and raised that exact point. We need to make sure that not only is Trammell Crow bound by this, but the property owner
Okay.
is also bound by this, because if the property owner isn't bound by the development agreement and we change the zoning, they can just go forward and develop pursuant to the zoning, unrestrained by the development agreement. So I think Attorney Robbins is here and can speak to that.
Good evening, members of the board. Let me just apologize in advance. I'm a little under the weather, but I'll try to speak as clearly as I can. Can you all understand me?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, we did speak with the property owner, and they are agreeable to signing off on the development agreement to address Mr. Cohen's concern. So the development agreement terms would go along with the property should anybody develop under the overlay.
So they're going to be a signature to the agreement? Correct. Okay.
Correct.
Does that,
So
does
we'll
that
have to-
satisfy your question, Paul?
Yeah,
Okay.
because, yes.
It's okay. Were you done?
No, yes, no, it does. I just want to be efficient and crisp with my comment, yes.
So we'll have to modify this agreement to include them as a signatory.
Will both development agreements be modified to include them?
I'm not sure
Yes.
that the choice one needs to be modified to include them, because it's essentially going to get wrapped into the Trammell Crow development agreement by cross-reference.
Okay.
But again, it doesn't hurt.
So there's not any way that everything can be covered in one development agreement and just have everybody sign just the one?
That was my question.
It probably could, Melissa. I don't see why that would be a problem.
It just seems
Yeah,
to me.
I mean, a lot of the provisions are just recitations of the other agreement
Right.
anyways, so.
Yeah, and we could just modify it slightly to have each developer responsible for their certain sections. So it wouldn't be impossible to do. It would just be reorganizing what exactly is in the development agreements today.
How do the other board members feel about that? Putting it in one agreement?
I think it makes it cleaner.
I think it does too. Okay, so before we leave the choice development agreement document, Paul Haverty, do you want to explain the second comment that you made?
The second comment is, again, it's similar. It's addressed really in the other development agreement where it requires a portion to be an affordable housing development. So this is already addressed.
Okay.
And again, once we work them into a single agreement, it's going to be much cleaner. I think that was a good suggestion.
Okay. Paul McDougall from the planning board is here.
Yeah, and there's, we have one member who joined in the Zoom room too,
Okay.
but I'm going to finish out
All
this
right.
discussion and we'll go back to that agenda item.
No
Thank
problem.
you. Okay, so could we go to the development agreement that The one that we started with for the select board?
Yes, and Madam Chair, if you'd like, I can just give a brief overview, and I know Mark Baranski from Trammell is here as well, but I can
Yeah.
just give a board a little bit of an update of what's transpired since the last meeting.
Yeah, and I just should, just for the record, for our recording secretary, besides Melissa Robbins, we have Mark Baranski from Trammell Crow in the Zoom room and Masek Brunick as well. And I think that covers it for your team, right, Melissa?
Yes,
Okay.
the only other, we do have our nonprofit development partner, David Hedison,
Yeah.
here as well on
Yeah.
behalf of Choice and SCG.
Okay, so go ahead, Melissa, I'll let you summarize.
So we've been to many meetings since the last Board of Selectmen meeting. We've been to the Conservation Commission, the School Committee, we've had a department heads meeting, and we've met with a couple other board committee members, as I know one of the committees actually spoke in the open session, just to try to make sure that we've spoke with any committee or board that wants to speak with us. I think the board was very concerned about a couple committees, so I'll focus on those. The first one being the school committee. And the school committee.
Melissa?
Yes.
Just for your information, we do have Dr. Jay Lang, the superintendent of schools, in the room here, and also Dennis King, the chair of the school committee.
Wonderful. Yes, and I wasn't in attendance at the school committee meeting, but members of Trammell Co. were there. And really, it was to try to discuss what the number should be for the school report that Mr. Lang had highlighted as necessary. And the school committee did discuss that number, and we found that $60,000 would be adequate to cover that study. So you'll see in the revised development agreement, it does reflect a number of $60,000. And we can circle back to that if you'd like. I just want to cover the two numbers that have been updated and then have a general discussion about both of them if we can, Madam Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
So the second number that's been updated, as you can see, is the payment in lieu of. And this actually came up as a discussion at the planning board level. They actually thought that the school department number would be much higher. And when it wasn't much higher, they thought that some more money should go into affordable housing. So to try to address that concern, we agreed that we would do 2 additional payments through the payment in lieu of, which is an additional $120,000. So it totals now $480,000 in the payment in lieu of under that section to alleviate that concern. So those are the 2 numbers that have been updated. I think that you can see the other changes are really minor. They got rid of the requirement, they got rid of the availability to connect to sewer later. They fixed some capitalization issues. They referred back to some other sections and then just got rid of a comment to address Deirdre's concerns, who was the member of the planning board who had raised it at the planning board meeting. So those are the major changes from the last meeting. I will also note that we did meet with the Conservation Commission, and they were satisfied with holding the conservation restriction with a local CR. And also, if we get to that level, would be interested in holding the conservation restriction itself. So we actually had a great discussion with the Conservation Commission. And I think I'll stop there just because that really encapsulates what we talked to pursuant to the development agreement and answer any questions the board may have or the school committee members that are there may have.
So, Dr. Lang, do you want to just give a little input on the 60,000 versus more than 60,000 for everyone's understanding? Because I think that in the last discussion I was in, that folks really hadn't seen the school committee meeting and weren't fully understanding what that discussion was. So.
Correct. Thank you very much. So, excuse me, when we were asked to kind of quantify what some of the costs associated with this development would be, or impact-wise on the schools, a couple of the hard costs that we were able to pretty quickly put our finger on were, as that development opens up, an updated student enrollment projection. Obviously, there were an enrollment projection done as part of the proposal, We would just want to do a longer-term enrollment projection to help us as we're going from kids from elementary to middle to high school, and there was a cost associated with that. The second thing that I believe I mentioned previously at a meeting was that particular development, if it went just based on current geography and our current districting plan, and the elementary school is our primary concern, would feed the Harrington Elementary School, where we know there is no capacity. So what we would need to do is a redistricting plan or proposal as well, and we would have to have a firm come in and work with us on that. So we had Doran Whittier Architects doing our facility long-term capital planning on hand. So we asked them, have you been involved with this type of work? They don't do it specifically themselves, but they have a couple of firms that typically get contracted to do that type of work. They put them in touch with us. We had a conversation about what would an updated long-term student enrollment projection study cost, a longitudinal study, as well as a redistricting study to look at even short-term. Would we just redistrict that development to another school in the district, or would we have to take a look at our whole district and redraw maps and whatnot? And the total cost for those two studies was approximately $60,000. So that's where the $60,000, and I think that's a hard cost that we could rely on. So I think that's where that's coming from. And obviously, it's very much appreciated that could be included in the agreement. We then, at the school committee meeting, had the concern about if the development comes online, obviously there are going to be recurring costs every year for additional students coming to the school district. It's largely anticipated that, say, the tax revenue from this development would fund other town services as well, including the schools. So we would eventually need to incorporate either it was extra staff or supplies or transportation or whatnot into our regular budget. Which again, hopefully will be subsidized by the cost of the tax increases coming in, which is great. And I know, the manager and I would be on the same page with regard to that. The school committee's concern was in the short term, or before that project really kind of fully ramped up. There will likely be some, what we call soft costs, if the other ones were hard costs, that are very difficult to quantify. And again, this is one of those situations where I don't 100% know what the dollar amount would be. Even as the staggered students come into that development and start coming online, it may be additional staff. It may be additional transportation costs before we kind of get that built into the budget. So the school committee was interested in a sum greater than the $60,000, but it was very difficult to quantify. So when we had those discussions internally, again, I don't think any of us had a hard number on what some of those costs might be. We said the 60 was hard, and then something beyond that would obviously be to the committee's kind of hope and desire to have a little bit of a fund to fund some of those costs. So it was our understanding that the developer perhaps went back to take a look at overall project costs and was considering allocating another $120,000 toward the project. Now, I know that got allocated up in the item number 4, and there was a little note about how the school committee 60 was probably less than the developer was thinking, which again, we just wanted to know what was hard and what was soft and hard to quantify. So the 60 is down below, which we agree with the hard costs. But we would actually request that 120, if that was going to be set aside, be allocated towards some type of a school purpose as opposed to just a general offset purpose. And again, hopefully that helps to kind of explain what the hard and the soft costs are at this point.
Any questions for Dr. Lang? Okay, thank you.
And I'll be here if anything else comes up.
Madam Chair, if I may, again, I'm Melissa Robbins. We did allocate the additional $120,000. We did have the discussion with the planning board about their preference about the location of that additional funds, and that, their preference at that point was to go towards affordable housing. But obviously, the development agreement is in the purview of the Board of Selectmen. So if the board wants to have further discussion about where that money is directed, we're happy to have further discussion on that.
And Paul, could you summarize what's in the Affordable Housing Fund now? And
Yeah, and David Hedison, who's watching, he's aware of this as well. Basically, we have an affordable housing trust fund that was established with the bylaw change going back a few years ago that allows the funds that are collected by the planning board that are received for payment in lieu of constructing the actual units. And then we've gone to town meeting now on 2 occasions to transfer monies to that account. The current balance in the fund is approximately $640,000. The intent is, it was expressed at the Community Preservation Committee meeting, was that if this project moves forward at town meeting, Choice, through David Hedison, who's on the call this evening, would request those monies in the fund, as well as additional Community Preservation Fund monies. And the discussion was $1.235 million to be allocated toward the construction of the senior affordable housing units at 255 Princeton Street. So that's where it stands. And I don't know if the funding provided here could be moved at the same, we'd have to have a discussion with council, or if the monies from this project would then go in addition to that. So this was conceived prior to this development agreement. But basically, the plan was to use the balance, the then current balance in the community, in the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund, plus community preservation funds to support the construction of the units at.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the plan was to use $640,000 in the current fund, and then the balance would be funded through the community preservation.
Right, undesignated reserve,
In the original Trammell Crow, well, not the original, but the last version of this agreement, what would actually be available in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund would be the $640K plus the additional $360, which is $1 million. Leaving $235K for community preservation or something else.
Right.
And so this $120K could either go toward that or toward the schools or be split somehow.
Exactly.
Attorney Haverty, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to point out that the additional 360, from this was going to it. And the town is required to spend a certain portion of Community Preservation Act money on affordable housing.
Right.
So to the extent that we haven't spent it on that, this is probably a good source to use these funds on. And it may weigh, more towards allocating this additional 120 towards the school costs. Because, one way or the other, the town's going to have to come up with whatever these costs are. So the question is it going to come from a fund that we're required already to, distribute towards affordable housing, or is it going to have to come out of some other fund?
Right, and we're meeting that 10% annually. If you may recall, when we go to town meeting and deal with the allocation from the Community Preservation Fund, we talk about the 3 buckets, and we are using the 10% minimum required annually to pay off the debt service for the units that are constructed on Littleton Road by Choice. So we're meeting that obligation. So as this whole discussion notes, money is fungible, but there is no shortfall in terms of meeting our obligation under that fund.
Okay.
Correct. Sorry.
Did you have
Thanks,
something,
David.
Mark?
Nope.
So could I ask, I guess, for a temperature check on where is the board leaning in terms of that 120?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards allocating it for the schools.
I think that was a number that I mentioned, the 150 total
Yeah.
at our last meeting, so I'm fine with that.
I'm wondering what.
As am I.
Madam
Paul?
Chair, I would note that there are multiple members of the planning board here now, and they did vote on how they wanted to see it distributed, so you might want to take some input from them.
Sure. Would anybody from the, and I know Deirdre Connolly's also in the Zoom room, and initially this was her idea because of the shortfall in the school committee, so. Would anybody from the planning board like to say anything?
Mike Raisbeck, Vice Chair Planning Board. We discussed it, and it was our preference that it get applied to affordable housing, but we did not take a formal vote.
Right.
We took a bit of a straw poll, and on the whole matter of the bylaw changes, but we didn't specifically commit to one use or the other of that money.
Thank you. Deirdre, did you want to say something? I saw your video come on.
Yeah,
Just give your name, please, for the record.
Deirdre Conley, 19 Billrica Road, Planning Board. I just wanted to say that, we did ask for additional units or additional PILO money in the beginning. We were actually looking for a number closer to 20, high teens, 20%, and we're actually getting only 16%. So, I mean, I didn't necessarily feel like the money was up for grabs between us and the school committee. And I mean, I guess in fact, maybe we could ask the developer if they could perhaps provide additional PILO money and additional money to the schools. That would be my preference, because I feel like they're creating a lot of very expensive housing, and what our need in town is for additional affordable housing. Either units or PILO funding.
Okay. Melissa or Mark, do you have any response to that at this time?
Hi,
Mark.
oh, go ahead, Mark.
Hi, Mark Baranski, Chelmsford Crossroads Residential. Thank you for the time to speak. I guess I'll apologize that we kind of did see it as a this or that, in the sense that, these requests are coming a little later in the game when other allocations have already been made. I can certainly go back and take a look, but we kind of felt like this was one of the last gives we could make comfortably and reasonably. So I think I'd have to go back, check the numbers, and circle back with you on that.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may, I just, as to the number of affordable units, since the original design, we have gone up in affordable.
Yes.
We've actually built 6 into the development itself, and then also the payment in lieu of was an idea after the fact. So originally we were at the number just in the SCG choice units, and then we added the 6 units within the Trammell Co., and then we added the $360,000. So we have gone up quite a bit since the original proposal. This additional $120,000 was to address the concern to the, whether or not, if it came up at the planning board meeting level that, wow, that school committee number is much lower than we thought it would be. So maybe there could be some more money put towards affordable housing. And so we agreed. So we said it'd be another $120,000. That's where the money came from. Two units under a PILO is 60,000 times 2. That's where we came up with the 120. But I honestly, if the board would like to split that between the school committee and an affordable housing payment, I know that Mark said he would go back, but at this point, the developer would be happy to split the money between the 2 campaigns to satisfy each board's concern.
Okay.
I just don't think we should be in the practice of moving the goalposts on developers at this stage.
Right.
So, I understand what what Melissa and Mark have said about, basically what Paul said too. I mean, the money is there for us to kind of split it either way.
And Paul.
Me too.
If you have a conversation, could you take it in the hallway, because your voices carry up here? Before the 360, including the 360,000 initially put in for the PILO, taking the 120 off the table, where does the projection of this development leave us relative to the state's 10% requirement? Are we well over it? Are we on the hairy edge?
We would exceed with the 54 units and then plus the 6, which would be 60, based on the information we have to date. And again, we don't have final census data of year-round units. We would exceed the 10% requirement. So that's where we stand at this point.
And the PILO payment isn't really going to change
Right.
that, because it's really just going to be put back into the development of the affordable units that are going to be created on this site.
Yeah.
So you're not getting additional affordable units really with additional money to the PILO. It's just keeping us from having to spend CPA money instead.
So, and so I'm just going to go back to make sure I'm clear. So prior to the 120, there'd be $1 million available from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then the community preservation would be another $235K roughly.
Right.
Okay, so given that, where's the board? Change, unchanged?
Unchanged.
Unchanged. Pat?
What are we asking?
I'm just asking to give some guidance on the 120. We've heard from the planning board. and-
Yeah, feel the same way, yeah. We can just.
Okay, and George?
Same.
Yeah, I do too. So that leaves us at putting that toward the school fund? And then the other question that had come up, there were two questions that came up during public input that I wanted to address. One is I appreciate everything the Trammell Croak team's been doing with the sustainability committee. Is there anything that needs to be formalized with that to encourage them to keep working with them throughout this development process? I know there's nothing we're going to quantify. I think that was the essence of what I heard during
Yeah.
public input is could we try to formalize that a little bit to just say that a good faith effort would be made to work with that committee or toward the town's net zero objectives. Paul, are you thinking of something over there?
No.
Oh,
no.
okay.
I
You look pensive.
Well, how do you determine good faith effort is always the part that.
Well, whatever the legal words would be.
I just
but-
don't know how you legally determine good faith effort, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my feelings on that is, if we want to put something in the agreement and if the developer is agreeable, but, at this point, again, I think if we were to try to put anything specific, again, we'd be moving a goalpost. We kind of have been working on disagreement and these criteria for months now, and.
But Melissa and Mark, you've been in conversations with that committee?
Madam Chair, Mark Baranski with Trammell Crow. Yes, we presented to the CEAS committee, I have to check my schedule, I think 2 weeks ago. And, I think it was a very fruitful conversation. I think we learned some things, and there was good input and advice. Broadly speaking, we know where the world's going, and there are some approaches and technologies that we intend to incorporate here. I guess probably if I had a concern, again, I think Board Member Wojtas mentioned this idea of, what does best faith mean? We are looking at this, assuming we have an affirmative vote at the town meeting. There'll be quite a bit of time for us to design in the technologies. We've actually been doing quite a bit of research on it to incorporate on this and other projects. I guess I just want to be really careful about what the words mean, because they if they aren't fairly precise, they can be misinterpreted.
Madam Chair, if I could also chime in as a developer of the affordable component, part of
Sure,
our
just give your
score-
name for the record.
Oh, sorry.
please.
David Hedison, Choice, Chelmsford Housing Authority, representing the Choice SCG project. So on our 54 units, we will be seeking tax credits from the state of Mass, which are federal tax credits. And part of the requirements is that we pretty much electrify the whole building and abandon fossil fuels. And there's a significant outline of the steps we will need to show towards net zero. So there is a commitment on the affordable component as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts?
Well, quick question for Mark, if you're still there.
Yeah, he is.
Are there specific technologies, because you talked about different technologies you're looking at, are there specific technologies when you did meet with the committee that might be more tangible that we could put into this agreement? Because we're talking in very generalities, and I realize everything hasn't been locked in yet.
Right, I mean, again, we've not designed the building yet.
Right, I understand.
We would like to incorporate solar arrays on the roof systems. That's a joint decision between our investors and us. However, it's something that we're incorporating in our assumptions. That's pretty important. We have a lot of what I'd call industry standard technologies that are already being utilized. Low flow toilets, that's not a surprise. Low flow sinks and faucets, lower outgassing or lower VOC paints and mastics for flooring materials. We are looking at the idea of zero waste on the construction site as something we'd like to explore, but we don't know enough about it, I'll be honest, to commit to that. We are looking at this project as a electric heat pump project with only maybe a bit of gas on the site to fulfill gas grills and pool heaters. I'd be leery of committing to that at this stage. We've done a lot of research on that technology over the past year. I can tell you a year ago, we looked at it for another project. We weren't comfortable with the technology. We're feeling a lot better about that and acknowledge that the world's changing and that in 6+ months, we could be at the point where doing electric heat pumps rather than a fossil fuel technology for heating is the path we'd take. I just want to be careful. I feel really good about it, but I wouldn't want to lock myself in quite yet. And I think that was effectively the message that was conveyed at the CEAS presentation.
Okay.
So where are we with this?
Are you talking just about the environmental issues?
Is it something we encourage them to work with the committee, or is it something we formalize that we encourage them to work with the committee?
Yeah, there's, based on what Mark has said, and, like I said, I think at this point, I don't feel the need to put something in the agreement.
Okay.
I don't think it would be very helpful
It
anyway.
would be so general?
Yeah, so I just think that if there isn't something
So we'll
tangible,
continue to encourage it.
Exactly.
Okay. And then the other public comment I wanted to make sure we address was the concern brought up by Mr. Royal about the sewage. And the development agreement right now states that they will provide on-site sewage treatment. And that was also driven through public input, and I think also a concern that we may not have the capacity in the future to connect into town sewer. So I just want to make sure we just flesh that comment out, because it did come up at the planning board as well, and I know they'll be discussing it.
Flush that comment out. Yeah, that's a good choice of words.
Yeah, not intentional.
Just to add.
But you looked very pensive over there, Paul, so I'm going to ask you to.
Pensive again.
Go ahead.
Just to add to that, too, I think I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was some language in there or somewhere, I think it was in the development or in the zoning, that would require them to have the capacity to, or have the ability to be able to hook into town sewer at a later date. But it sounds like that was taken out. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So now, was there a rationale why that was taken out?
During the planning board hearings, I believe there was a comment made by a resident.
It was during the planning board hearings and also during Trammell Crow's public meeting that they hosted.
That they be prohibited essentially from ever connecting.
Well, that's what we know today.
Well, and Again, I don't see a developer that is going to want to put in $1 million plus wastewater treatment facility and then be required to tie into a municipal sewer system afterwards. They're going to want to continue to operate their
Understand.
wastewater treatment facility.
That's what I'm trying to get at, is what kind of went into that? Because when something's there and then it's taken out, I just want to, thoroughly understand why.
The other thing I would point out is those package treatment plants are regulated by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. So they're not going to get a permit if it's going to have any adverse impact, short or long-term, environmentally, because and not only for the installation, but the ongoing operation. They are under strict Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and oversight.
And I'm sure the applicant can explain further, but they're required to have an on-site operator that actually, and testing is done constantly. So I know that there's a tendency to sort of compare it to a large septic system serving a number of different houses, but the end result of what comes out of a wastewater treatment facility is markedly different than what comes out of a septic system, either a small or a larger type septic system. It's, if not at drinking water quality, it's pretty close of what comes out of a wastewater treatment facility.
And if I may, Madam Chair, I know we don't have Dave Formato from On-Site Engineering here, and I will not pretend that I am any sort of wastewater treatment facility engineer, but let me just recap, if I can, what he said at the planning board meeting is this is the best available technology. We would be putting in a wastewater treatment facility that would be very similar to a facility that the town would be installing should they want to install something like this to accommodate a project of this size. We've done some preliminary testing. Mr. Haverty, Council Haverty is very right that this has to go through DEP. It will be permitted through DEP. It's a multi-million-dollar system. Once the system is complete and operational, there also has to be a repair and replacement account, which is almost, again, another $1,000. So should $600,000, I think, at minimum, so that if there's any repairs or replacements that need to be made right up front, that they can be repaired and replaced. And the intention is this wastewater treatment facility would be put in place and have enough money in the account for when it has to be replaced or components has to be replaced. There's already money in that system. So we have no issues going forward with the wastewater treatment facility. We understand that it's going to be the development's responsibility. We understand that the town of Chelmsford is in a very sensitive state right now as to sewer and sewer capacity and is in a moratorium, and we're not looking in any way to later connect to the sewer system in the town of Chelmsford. We will provide our own treatment through this wastewater treatment facility, and we'll also give access to that wastewater treatment facility to the SCG and choice units within the development.
Just a closing comment. One of the benefits of the on-site system is it puts the water back into the water table. One of the concerns of the sewage system is it takes it away from the community, and that is another environmental concern. I know it sounds a little strange, but the idea of that water now staying in the water table actually benefits the aquifer of the area. So
Yeah, that wasn't the reason for my
no, but I
question,
know that that's
yeah,
sometimes
understood.
missed when people think about wastewater systems.
Mhm.
Dr. Lang, did you want to say something?
Not about water treatment. But no, I just didn't, because I know it'll come up tomorrow night at our school committee meeting. I just wasn't sure if we, would there be like a formal vote to direct the 120 towards schools, or do we know where that'll stand? I just don't know what to report out at the end of this process. I don't know if the board could just touch on that before the end of the meeting.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So with respect to the sewage treatment, I think I'm hearing we're going to let it stay where it is.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so before we leave this topic, do we need to vote on this now? I mean, we vote when we get the whole thing in place, right?
Correct.
But I think the guidance that we're giving right now is to move that 120 to the school system. It's a unanimous opinion by the board.
Mhm.
Do we need to?
I don't think you need to take a vote on that at this point.
We haven't been
in time.
piece part voting on anything
Right.
so far, so I think I would prefer to vote when we're done.
Right, but I think the direction is clear.
Yeah, okay. All right, is there anything more on the development agreement? I had a question, Well, section 1B, there's just a typo. It says treatment plan instead of treatment plant. So you might want to just look at that. But on 2E, we might have addressed this before, but when it talks about reasonable costs of peer review, is that something that I guess you're legally comfortable with, since we didn't, when we tried to quantify it, it was too low?
Which document are we on right now?
I'm in the development agreement, paragraph 2E. The applicant will fund an account pursuant.
Section 1,
Page 2.
development. Page 2, 2E.
I'm sorry, it's section 2, traffic. Paragraph E.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm on the bylaw for some reason. There we go.
I just wanted to sanity check this. When we first started with it, it was, there was something like a $8,000 number attached to it, and we said that was way too low, and now it says reasonable costs. So we're comfortable with leaving it at reasonable?
Yes. Yep, and my only concern was in putting a figure there, you might actually be limiting what the planning board can impose for peer review consultant costs.
Okay.
And I didn't want to do that. So I think leaving it at reasonable cost is appropriate. I mean, in any circumstance, the planning board is not entitled to impose peer review costs that are not reasonable. So whether or not it says this in this agreement or not, under General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53G, the peer review consultant fees are required to be reasonable.
Okay. And then my last question was on paragraph 8, conservation. I know there was some back and forth on whether it would be local or through a state conservation restriction, and I just wanted to make sure that, as far as you understand it, Attorney Haverty, everybody's aligned on the way it's written now.
That's my understanding. The Conservation Commission preferred the local restriction rather than the state restriction.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on the development agreements?
Madam Chair, can I just ask a question? So the only two changes that we're making to the development agreement is to merge the two documents and to shift the $120,000 from the PILO to the school section, and that's it.
Yep. And fix the typo.
And fix the typo, yes. But those are the only three changes to the development agreement.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to agenda item 7, which is the status of the planning board zoning article for the same development. And just for the record, board member LaFave is still recusing himself from this discussion. I believe, isn't he?
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. It's the same
It's still
subject
the-
matter, so I think he's better off.
Okay. So, the planning board, for the record, from the planning board, we have Deirdre Connolly in the Zoom room. In the room here, we have Mike Raisbeck, Paul McDougall, and I think that's it. Nancy Arroway, sorry. So, this is on the agenda at the planning board's request. You wanted to give us the status on where you were and whether or not we should begin to take action on scheduling a special town meeting. We also have in the Zoom room, if he's still there, John Curland, our town.
I'm here.
Okay, our town moderator, John Curland, so go ahead.
Yes, we did discuss it at the last planning board meeting. We decided not to take a formal vote because, as we can see, minor changes are still working their way through. But we took a straw vote, and it was, I believe it was unanimous.
No, you had one opposed.
We missed one? Okay, there's one. All right, I guess that made it 5-1? 5-1. It was 5-1. We were missing a few members. And it was a 5-1 in favor of this. Pretty much as the bylaw changes are constructed. We would formalize that when the development agreement gets locked down. And so we're prepared to proceed.
Okay. And what happened to Paul Cohen?
I don't know.
He recused himself.
I'm looking for,
And Madam Chair, I would note that the one dissenting member of the planning board, who is in the room and certainly can speak for herself, indicated her concern was with the change from age-restricted to affordable in the definition, because she felt that the way it was drafted was really drafted more towards an age restriction than it was towards an affordable requirement, which I understand. It was a last-minute change-up to address, the
Yeah.
news that had just come out earlier that day.
So I think right now the objective is set the goalpost for if or when we schedule a special town meeting, and then with you being confident that you can get the zoning article completed in time for the review cycles.
Yes, that we are.
And then we have between now and town meeting to finalize the development agreement,
Yeah.
right?
And also,
So-
let me note that another reason, maybe the most important reason that we did not take a formal vote on that is because the changes had just come out that day from the
Well,
state, and we're
yeah.
still waiting for that to
Right.
be analyzed.
And DHCD is having an input session on January 12th, which I intend to participate in.
Good.
Okay. So, Paul, do you want to summarize where we are relative to scheduling?
Yeah, that's why I
The
just,
planning board feels that they're ready, and John Kurland is on the phone.
that's why I
in the
asked John
Zoom
to
room.
join the call, and that's why I wanted to grab Jay Lang for a question about
Oh, okay.
when the school might be available in terms of if there's an alternate site. So I think probably the best thing to do is turn it over to John Kurland in terms of discussion of when to have a town meeting. I think realistically, you need a month. You need 5
Yeah.
weeks, and probably the earliest that you could have a warrant signed would be January 3rd, which would be 2 weeks from tonight, which is when you have a special meeting
Right.
that night. And I'm sure between now and then, we could get a warrant finalized by town council. Realistically, and allowing the finance committee to meet, have a hearing, do a report, and get it, and logistically, it's probably a month. So I would think that the earliest you could do it would be beginning of February. Either 5 weeks from the 3rd of January, which would be February 7th, or somewhere around there. And then I think the big unknown, the big uncertainty is this: what type of restrictions we may be entering with this pandemic. And I think I know that's the discussion I had with John Kurland, and I know he had a conversation with Jay Lang, and I know John discussed it with Sue Rosa and so forth. So that's the logistical aspect of it. Is you really need 4 to 5 weeks practically, even though technically the law is you could do it in 14 days, but you really can't 14 days from posting.
John Kurland, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I'd like to add is that, as the
Excuse
town
me,
manager has pointed out.
just for the record, could you state your name?
Oh, sure. John Kurland, town moderator.
Thank you.
I have spoken with Sue Rosa. She has expressed serious concerns about Omicron, and actually the town numbers right now are not great. I believe we're over 7%, and that they anticipate. Everybody seems to anticipate a spike in infections after the holidays. So I spoke to Dr. Lang regarding the feasibility of having town meeting on a date when the school is not going to need the gym. And I'm waiting a result. My initial feeling was that school vacation week, the Thursday, the 24th of February, might be a good date to be able to have it in the high school gym if we have to abide by social distancing as well as masks and anything else that the government imposes on us at that time. Dr. Lang has indicated to me that he was going to be checking with I guess there may be a wrestling tournament around that time. He wanted an assurance that it would be a one-night meeting, which I believe we can make. So that's what I'm looking at right now. Obviously, I would prefer the senior center if we could possibly do it, and that would open up a lot more dates. But right now, there's too many unknowns, and I know that it's easier for the select board to schedule it on a specific date at a specific location than to start moving pieces around afterwards.
Yeah, when I spoke to Dr. Lang, he was 95% certain that the gym would be available on, that school vacation week. The other possibility, and I know John's aware of this as well, would be the Performing Arts Center at the school, which is a large venue, probably has more modern ventilation than the gymnasium building, because it seats 1,000 people, and it's obviously a newer facility. I think the concern there, and John could speak to this better than me, is, do you then have people crawling over each other because of the aisle nature of the facility? In other words, if people are going to the mic, you're in somewhat close contact, whereas when we were in the gym, you're sort of spaced out with individual seats. So that's the other option for a venue would be, or the other one would be even the new McCarthy Auditorium, but that's not quite as large and doesn't have as recent of a ventilation system that the Performing Arts Center has. So again, the only drawback of school vacation week is some people tend to travel on school vacation week because of families being away. So there's no good, perfect solution.
But I think I think what I'm hearing is the week of February 7th is not something that you feel is feasible to commit to with the unknowns of
Well, it would be
Omicron.
you'd be casting a lot in the senior center, and I think the concern is, and
I'm just saying it because you brought up the week
Right.
for February 7th.
right, again, my job is to give you pluses and minuses. I think you could do it in that 5-week period. The concern with the senior center is it's a smaller venue, and also the population skews for our town meeting reps tends to skew towards an older population, and I think that may be a concern. I think we saw that a little bit even with the fall and spring town meeting. We had a lighter attendance than we typically would have, so that's the other decision to weigh.
I mean, quite frankly, I think holding it a little bit later at this point, or scheduling a little bit later if we're going to set a date tonight, it would be, my preference would be later, because even if we set it for February 7th, I mean, that's assuming everything goes exactly in line, and I think we need a little bit of buffer.
Does that make sense to you, planning board rep?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Matters precisely to us, just give it, I think we can make either date.
Okay. So if we're going to work toward... Go ahead,
My
John.
concern about that early is if we have spikes in December, based on the holidays, that even the week of February 7th, the spiking may not abate, and if those additional 2+ weeks may make a difference as far as our numbers. I mean, and I've said this throughout. My primary concern is the health and welfare of the town meeting reps, and if we have to put it off a little bit longer to make sure that we can hold town meeting safely, that's always my preference. I don't know what time restrictions you have regarding the importance of this special town meeting. Obviously, you're scheduling it, so to me it means that it's important. But I'm hoping that, if we have to put it off till the week of the 21st and have it on the 24th, my concern about the Performing Arts Center, besides people crawling over to get to microphones and things like that, is we did have a special town meeting there for the Warren Poll article, which was a quicker article than this may take. And social distancing was difficult even that way. There were people sitting well within 5 or 6 feet of each other in certain areas. So, that would be a poor second choice from the high school gym. And we may be able to work it if we can just be more careful about seating. But It was not what I felt was optimal when we had the meeting there the last time.
So I think, Paul, if we're going to head for the week of the February 21st, we could sign the warrant on the 10th if you needed
Sure.
a little more time,
Yep,
right? With
yep.
the holiday and everything.
Mhm.
And that would give you time to finalize things with Dr. Lang and,
Mhm.
does that make sense for folks? So
Yeah, and
if
those are-
the warrant's ready on the 3rd, we can squeeze it in, but I think it sounds like it's very comfortable if we sign it on the 10th.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Sure, yeah. So the target date, just because I can start alerting the finance committee, and so the target date would be Thursday, February 24th, at the CHS gym. And then we'll work to get a warrant together.
Melissa, one more second. Melissa and Mark, does that date sound feasible on your end?
Yes, and we understand that if there's a COVID-related issue that we would have to adjust our timeline accordingly, but we appreciate the board getting this ready for a February town meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
And the only other thing I'll say in closing is, you remember there were a few miscellaneous things that we wanted to deal with
Right.
at town meeting, so we'll pull those together as well.
As long as they fit in one night.
Yeah, no, they'll be first, and then this thing will be last, because nobody's going to want to deal with anything after this discussion. So we'll do that.
Okay. All right, so I think we're done with that one. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Okay.
And now Ken can come back.
So
Now I
Paul,
can get Ken.
oh, yeah, Ken LaFave is coming back to the meeting.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night. Have a great holiday.
And we are on item number 9, reports and presentations, so I'll turn it over to you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We're joined tonight by Assistant DPW Director Steve Yonley, who's got a few items to discuss, bring the board up to date on in the community, and then we have DPW Director Gary Persichetti on an item after that. So the first item is just to give a quick overview of the recent sewer main break on Richardson Road. Good evening, Steve.
Good evening, Steve Yonley, Assistant Public Works Director. Just real briefly, back on December 1st, approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we received a phone call from an employee of actually the Chelmsford Water District indicating a little bit of concern over something happening on Richardson Road. When we investigated, it was determined we had a sewer break in the force main coming out about 100 yards towards 3A from the pump station. We assessed, started making phone calls. The first contractor we spoke with couldn't mobilize for about 24 hours. We moved on to the second contractor who was on site within about an hour and a half, had equipment there within a couple hours. We went on to standby at the station with pump trucks, so there was no service disruption. About 4 in the morning, the break was repaired. You can see in that photo the actual break in the pipe. Yep. It's believed to be that section of pipe resulted in some electrolysis, which kind of rapidly degrades the pipe, caused the break. Again, about 4 in the morning, the break was repaired with a new 4-foot section, pump station back in service, and then we had backfill and cleanup, road restoration through the better part of the rest of the day, the following day. But all in all, 12 hours from 13 hours from the phone call, we had it repaired and the station back in service. So again, no disruption because we were rotating through pumper trucks. And again, the road was paved the following day. So all in all, it worked out well. The unfortunate thing here is that the force main was installed so deep. It was about 12, a little better than 12 feet deep, very sandy soil there, very high groundwater, something that we couldn't handle internally, so it resulted in, a call off the contractors. If it was 5 to 6 foot deep, we could have handled it ourselves, but we're just not set up for something at that depth with that type of material and that amount of groundwater. So calls were made and situation. happy to
Thank
answer
you, Steve.
any questions if anybody has them.
It's a good job. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, you want to move on to the 54 Richardson Road PFAS quarterly testing results that came in since the last board meeting?
Yep. Does Member Dixon have to step out, or does he not have to step out? I just don't want to start talking.
Yeah, so for the record, Board Member Dixon is recusing himself from this topic.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Yeah, so back at the beginning of November, Weston and Sampson performed another round of sampling on all the wells installed through the 54 Richardson Road property, the dog park area, and then the 2 wells installed across the street on North Chelmsford Water's property. As you can see through some of these results, number of the wells had some increase, some small, some significant. There's also wells that decreased. Case in point, that one over at the dog park continues to decrease for some reason, but the one hot spot in front of the main garage continues to increase. And there's a small handful of wells that seem to fluctuate. They've been low to high to back to low to high to low and rising again. So there's some further analysis on that. We think some of the, with all the rain over the summer and kind of a push in groundwater, is causing a little bit of movement in the plume. They're analyzing we installed the 3 piezometers through the stream bed in Cold Spring Brook. They're analyzing that to see if that has any impact. But all in all, with these results here and some of the work being done on the actual treatment system or some of the initial work, we did a site walk last week, or 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, kind of looking at siting the system and doing the main withdrawal well for that. So that work is ongoing. There'll be some initial work on that coming up over the next couple of weeks. Parts are being ordered for the system. There's somewhat of a long lead time on some of the stuff, but the hope is everything is installed up and running per the DEP order. So, this is a large-scale project that is ongoing, and we are under a pretty tight timeline. So I understand everyone's concern, and we're working as quick as we possibly can towards remedying the situation.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Okay. Next, Steve, just touch upon the submittal that John Potts did on the sewer ACOP documents to DEP. I think we're all on schedule and everything's submitted now.
Yep. So the first thing I see on the screen is just the update to the emergency response plan. In the conversations with DEP, they had, I won't say they sent us a template, but they sent us some ones that they had okayed in the past. So we updated ours, fitted into the formats that was sent, and sent that off per the timelines. And then the other document was kind of an update with our permitting. It shows the investigations we've done since back in 2018 when we began with camera work, kind of quantifies all that was done, our flushing program, and things to like, just to show, to kind of document the fact that, we have been doing this stuff per the permits, and then going through with the camera work per the 2019 I&I study that was done. So they acknowledged receipt. We have not to date received any sort of comments that I'm aware of as of today, either ourselves or John at Weston and Sampson. So that's pretty much it on those. I'd be happy to answer questions if there are any.
So we await comments from the DEP and go from there, or?
We keep proceeding. I mean, we're now, after we've now done the submittals, we now have a year to do the investigation and other work, and that's what we're proceeding on now.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. And then just a lot.
There seem to be some things missing from the document.
From the submittal to the DEP?
Like Appendix B on page I don't know if it's Adobe page 10 or document page 10, but.
I think that's
So-
because
so
some of
here's
those
Appendix B, but-
appendixes were so large.
Yeah,
They were
oh,
sent
so
on
they were
different
set,
color.
they were set as just different
They were,
files?
yeah, like the flow
Okay.
assessment thing, that's a few hundred pages that was
Okay,
sent
because
separately.
there were exhibits too that were the same thing, so that must be what it
Yep.
is.
Yep, no, there was a few different submittals, because
All right.
it's just due to the file size.
And we haven't gotten any feedback from
No.
DEP yet. Okay, thank
No.
you, Steve.
Okay, and then
Sure.
just the last one, Steve, touch upon our sewer flows. I provided the board, and they have on the screen the November sewer flow data, and we're still running high, and although November was a drier month, and December is a drier month too, so we'll interested to see what we see in 10 days for the December runs.
Yeah, looking back, I looked a little bit this morning historically back to the fall of 2017 and 2018, and the numbers are a tick higher, I'll say. Nothing more than that. That could be due to still just, high groundwater. I mean, with it's not a very significant difference from back then, pre-pandemic. Without doing a full analysis of what buildings were full and empty and that type of thing. But then the numbers are pretty similar. I mean, there's no real surprises here. Obviously, back in the summer, we had, 14 inches of rain or whatever the number is over, an 8-week period. So everybody experiences an uptick, but nothing we didn't really expect to see here.
Okay, thank you, Steve. All right. Now we'll move on to Gary Persichetti regarding the Chelmsford Forum. Good evening, Gary. And
Good evening, Gary Persichetti, Public Works Director. Over the last couple of weeks, the Chelmsford Forum has suffered a couple of power outages. One of them contained 3-phase power going down to 2-phase. So when
Oh,
you
I'm
lose
sorry,
a phase, what
Gary?
happens is,
Hang on.
yes,
Board Member Dixon's rejoining the meeting. I apologize, George.
sorry, yep.
I was just kicking it over.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'll just recap quickly that they suffered a couple of power outages. One of them was a phasing issue where you lose 1 phase of your 3-phase power. And what that does is affects motors, pumps, and anything that runs on 3-phase to a point when you lose a phase on that. So actually, what was reported initially was an electrical panel, which ended up being a control panel. So what we did is we lost the controls to all of the equipment within the room. And that really played havoc with what we had to do. So the first thing we did is we did an assessment. We shut down the rink for the simple fact that without having your panel, you have no controls and you have no way of having safeties in place to run any pieces of equipment, which you don't want to run and have people within the room. The controls panel was built in 1985 and has been in that building in existence. Finding parts, finding a way to get this back up and running was not looking good. We were looking towards probably renting a chiller to the tune of about $50,000 for a month and $1,000 a day for fuel. I was able to talk to the original company, FMC, that ran the rink, and they were able to put me in touch with the gentleman that installed the panel. I met him there this morning at 6 a.m. Being the age he is and in the business he's been in for so long, he still had a computer that was able to do a RS-32 port. It still had Windows XP on it, and he still had the program. So we were able to replace the main board in it. He was able to reload everything, and the rink is up and running. Our assessment will continue on with our insurance company because we have one of the cat chillers that suffered a little damage, and we're still not done doing a full assessment of the room itself. But it is up and running. All the safeties are back in place. Every piece of equipment needed to run it is running, and it's going to be approximately 4 to 5 days to bring the ice back. And then they should be able to reopen, but the rink management company will be making those phone calls to the ADs and to people that use the rink. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
So just in terms of the long term, we've been planning, meaning Gary, I, and facilities, we've been planning on the replacement of this control system. As Gary noted, it was a 1985 model. and we had anticipated actually being ahead of this. What sort of pushed us a little back is we were intending to put solar on the roof of the forum, but when the structural analysis came back, the roof can't support the solar because of the construction that was, again, it was a facility constructed in 1965. So we're now exploring ground mount possibilities for solar, as well as, getting the design work to do this. Again, one of the issues is going to be lead time and everything else. So we anticipate going to town meeting no later than April for perhaps either the design and/or funding to do this. But again, going back to the green thing with Baudry, we're going to talk to the Sustainability Committee, is, again, converting from natural gas to all electric is a different system, and that's where solar could come in as well. So anyway, the point of what I'm saying is we're really looking towards a permanent upgrade of the whole control systems, because we saw what happened in terms of trying to scrambling for a couple of days to find somebody either had that panel, or we were going to have to manually have to work with our controls people to reconstruct the system. So that's sort of where we are long term, is in the solution of that. So
Okay.
so it was a good thing. Okay. Thank you, Gary. Have a good night. And now we have Lisa Maroney, our Business Development Director, who's here to report on two initiatives. The first one has to do with a fitness park, and the second with the Route 129 Business Corridor signage. Good evening, Lisa, and thanks for staying for the meeting tonight.
Good evening. Thank you for a moment of your time. I'm going to provide a brief update on two small projects that I've been working on. So, two topics: National Fitness Campaign and the Chelmsford Crossroads signage that's coming soon. I just wanted to provide some details. So what is National Fitness Campaign? As you can see from this information here, some details. It's a nationwide fitness program that's started in California. It's reached the East Coast, and it's an outdoor exercise system that can also be coordinated with an app on a smartphone. You can find many videos on YouTube if you'd like to look at it a little bit more specifically. But from this slide, it's a 7-minute workout that people of all ages and all abilities and levels can participate with. So in 2018, when I was hired, former select member Glenn Diggs asked that I begin working on the National Fitness Campaign, and I have been. Since then, it's been delayed by a few factors, those being that at that time there were no other National Fitness Campaign projects happening in Massachusetts. And I was still a little bit hesitant to understand what this means in a New England climate versus California, ice, winter, snow, those types of things. And I was really trying to understand and learn about the community, where we could place it. There were no grants available at that time in 2018. And there were just a lot of unknowns, and then COVID arrived and so on and so forth. So as you can see from this slide, we were recently awarded as a first community in Massachusetts to receive $50,000 from the Blue Cross Blue Shield grant partnership that has since happened with the National Fitness Campaign. So that's a really big deal to receive that amount of money and to be the first community in Massachusetts, yet we are not the first project to be done. So we'll talk more about that. But they are aggressively pursuing more projects in New England, and they have a plan to install 1,000 of these fitness courts throughout the country next year. So this is the image of the completed project in Tewksbury, installed in 2019. This project received $10,000 in grant money, and the remaining of the balance, we'll talk about finances a little bit into a few more slides, but the remaining of the project here in Tewksbury was paid for by the town. Project in Burlington, they received $10,000 in grant funding. The grant money that was awarded to these projects came from the National Fitness Campaign. So this project in Burlington received about $10,000 in grant funding. They received sponsorship from Leahy Hospital, which then shows their advertising on the backside of the fitness court. and the remaining balance of that project was covered by the town. Also, I did not get to put up a slide on this ahead of time, but the town of Everett is in the construction phase of building a fitness court. In their town, they received $30,000 in grant funding, and the remaining balance of their project is being covered by the town. Town of Townsend has begun conversations and working towards fulfilling the financial requirements of getting a project going. There's no mention of receiving any grant funding in the town of Townsend. They're searching for sponsors and donors and private funds to get their project off the ground and more in a planning stage, but they're not there yet. Also, the town of Hadley, as you can see, they started conversations in 2020, and it kind of stopped there. But just making a note that another community is trying to get this national fitness campaign going in their community. They've been talking about grant funds, but there wasn't any more information that I could readily find on that project in Hadley. So it just brings us forward to the possibility of Chelmsford project. And as you may have seen, I've been working on this for a couple of years, and I'm reaching the point now of some decision-making that's needed. Either is there interest from the town to do a project like this? Where would the remaining funding source come from? And we've been working on location options, I've been meeting with the DPW, town manager has been helping with this as well, and we kind of came up with a short list of 4 possibilities. Certainly the easiest is to work with town-owned land. We talked about privately owned land. That's a very complicated pursuit and rarely done with any of these projects throughout the country. So we've come up with these 4 possibilities of sites. And should we want to move forward, it would likely be a possibility of installation in the late summer. So on the funding timeline here, you can see $50,000 of the grant money is in a holding pattern for us to decide if we'd like to move forward. But the entire project for installation is $140,000. Separate, in addition to that, is a $20,000 concrete fitness pad that could either be installed by the DPW or outsourced by a contractor. And the assembly of the equipment is done by a vendor contractor that the program works with consistently throughout the country. So that's $25,000. So total price, if we wanted to pursue something like this, would be $135,000. This fitness court is something that is considered a community amenity for outdoor fitness and wellness. The closest other fitness court for viewing is about 10 minutes away in Tewksbury. If there's any interest to go and view that and see how that actually looks and feels in person. And the National Fitness Campaign is planning to install 5 projects in Massachusetts next year. So again, we're reaching a point of needing some decisions and direction and interest. Is this something we want to pursue? And that's why I'm bringing forward, because I haven't been able to reach this point thus far in the years I've been kind of dabbling with it, and we're at a decision-making point.
In terms of funding source, we would look to the Community Preservation Fund, for the open space recreational aspect, and they meet monthly, and we could either have this done either at spring annual town meeting, or conceivably we could even bring it to a February special town meeting to move it along even sooner. The big question and the challenge was where to locate it. You'll notice on the list of the 4 locations, town-owned land, they're not school sites. And the reason we didn't put school properties is because you're restricted during school hours. And so that's why we didn't look at the high school or McCarthy and so forth. And then really, they really would not adhere to the terms of the conservation restrictions on conservation land. And as you know, the only properties the town really has are these parkland aspects, which are Hart Pond, Varney, Eastfield on Carlisle Street, and Roberts Field. The reason we've ruled out Roberts as is because Roberts already has that fitness equipment on the perimeter, and sort of seemed redundant, and it also just seemed that maybe we could concentrate this at a different location. Hart Pond looked appealing, and the reason that Hart Pond looked appealing was its proximity to the rail trail, is that it could be an amenity that would complement the rail trail in terms of the users going up and down. And, there's the land by Hard Pond and the parking area. And there's also, believe it or not, a town-owned property that adjacent to the gasoline station. The problem with those locations is they tend to be wet, and they're limited, and so we've sort of shifted away from that, and then we sort of settled upon Roberts Field. On Varney Playground as the location, given that we're right now in the midst of planning and constructing the new children's playground at Varney, and so the thought being is that perhaps this could complement it. And the area that we're targeting, just as a thought, would be, if you recall where the original basketball court was at Varney Playground, which is by the WPA shed, sort of, you got the baseball field, and then you sort of have the basketball court, which is now sort of a green space area, and then you have the children's playground that's going to be constructed as you move, towards left field, as going that way at Varney. Eastfield would be a tight fit, and that was sort of, and that was, as you were aware, we sort of put a box in over at Hart Pond, and then really couldn't fit a box in over at Eastfield on Carlisle Street. So our thought would be to proceed would be at Varney. It certainly meets all the initiatives at Varney, and again, there isn't that type of an adult exercise fitness park, on the site at Varney, but that's sort of where we're gravitating towards now. So
how much room do you need for one of these?
It's 38 by 38 pad, 38 feet by 38 feet pad. So we measured 40 by 40, and also you want to have accessibility. So, and Varney offered that as well, that if you went to Varney, you already have the walkway, and then, which would then go to the fitness park, so it would be ADA accessible.
And I'm just going to throw these
Sure,
out
please.
there, but
I will welcome any thoughts. That's why we're here.
behind like the CCA, all the way in the back there, in the back of the parking lot, is there room there? Right off the rail trail, it's in the center. It's
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, it's a bit remote. I mean, I guess conceivably.
Or I was thinking maybe if you
You take up the parking lot
Take up
with
some of
it?
the
Is
a
that what
portion.
you're-
That's why I said 40 by 40. And people would only be using it during the day, where the CCA does a lot of their stuff at night.
Any
Yeah, but you
thoughts,
couldn't
Gary, on the
park on top
CCA
of it.
back lot?
But you wouldn't have people parking to use the court and the CCA.
No, you'd sacrifice some parking space at the very end. I know what you're saying, way at the end
But
there.
they pushed a lot of dirt or fill back there and then made more parking, and I'm just wondering that.
Hey,
That's one
honestly,
thought,
thank
or-
you. Yeah.
Or even if you abutted,
Steve's got his video on here.
or even if you abutted it somewhere over in McCarthy.
Yeah.
And I know you don't like school land, but if you found the edge, I'm thinking of like the parking lot at the high school that's kind of opposite the McCarthy Field, that dirt kind of, if you stuck it there on the edge, and that way it wouldn't be actually part of the school, but would have access to it maybe during school hours, just because, and just stuck it on the edge of a school property. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to
Yeah,
other
no, we
locations
agree.
there.
No, we thought about, thank you. Steve, what are your thoughts, Gary, what are your thoughts on the CCA parking lot and that area of the high school?
Just a concern with the back of the CCA parking lot. That's where all the snow goes. So, it's a natural place to plow. The snow there is to push all the way straight in the back. So, that would just make plowing that place a nightmare, where it's actually not that bad right now. So, just my only comment on that.
And the problem with the high school is you already have not the same, but some similar courses at the McCarthy itself, right next to the playground. You have a brand new one that just reopened at the Parker. So I think you're clustering a lot. That's why I was hoping that we could go on the other side of town. Thank you.
Is it intended to be illuminated at night or not? Do you know?
It can be. It's not a requirement. It can be. I mean, but the Varney area, but I know, the problem with Varney at night is the neighbors get up in arms with, people hang, particularly if you're gonna have youth and teenagers, that I'm not sure that they'd welcome that. Although if you were back there by the CCA, you're right, there's nobody really there to bother other than.
It's right off the rail trail.
It's right off the rail trail. That was a great suggestion. I hadn't thought of that. Okay. We'll
Is there
look.
any other, if you think of the rail trail,
Mhm.
for any other spot off the rail trail?
We looked. I looked up and down. The town owns a parcel that was acquired by tax possession, but it's past Glen Avenue towards Lowell, and I just don't know that people would frequent that end often enough. Because I mean, we literally went. The other issue, like the land what was donated as part of Gristmill 1, but that was for conservation purposes, and we don't think we could use that either. You remember where we had talked about the bridge and the connection, but
Nothing behind here.
no. No, and even here, we even looked back here, but the problem back here is the Little League field, it's all wet. I mean, they've taken every inch of available space back here to put in use, and it's the same problem with Southwell. Southwell's too remote, too.
When you get out to the other end of High Street where the rail trail crosses, wasn't there some land there that the town owned?
Yeah, there was a donation there for the Conservation Commission, and they were supposed to put perhaps a parking area. Then they determined it was too narrow for a parking area. That was right by High Street, right at the rail trail.
Place to park for a park. Yeah.
Exactly. But so anyway, that's a good idea. We can look at the CCA area as a potential area.
Are they gonna do anything with
Ken,
it?
are you opposed to Varney, or are you just thinking more central?
I'm just thinking more central, that's
Okay.
all.
Exactly, and and we were thinking rail trail, and that's why Hart was so appealing initially. We were looking around.
Yeah. I think you'd have to take
not
up
really
some of the
central
parking and
either.
everything else and the wetland there too.
Yeah, so that, it would have been a tight fit, but the other beauty of it is that's why we looked next to the playground, is you'd have the children's playground, you have the adults, so you could be watching your kids or keeping an eye on them on the beach, but, I get some of the pushback the other
Are they gonna do anything with the tennis courts at McCarthy?
Yeah, we thought about the tennis courts in McCarthy. The problem is you can't do anything with that until you really reconstruct the tennis courts at the high school. Because that would have been another one. Where the skateboard park would be a great one, but they made the skateboard park there. And then you could, behind the police station where the tennis courts are, has been the other suggestion.
Are they moving forward with the future home of the Hall of Fame?
No.
We're getting a little off
We have a
topic
lot,
here.
we have a lot left on this.
Yeah,
agenda.
that's controlled by the school committee, and that required a town meeting vote to do that. So, okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Do you want to move on now to the?
I just have one more quick slide
Sure.
to share.
Okay.
And so the Chelmsford Crossroads, I've been at this a little bit, and finally reaching the scheduling layer of this process. So the signs are scheduled to be installed in February, hopefully sooner. That's a pretty big deal. I've been giving you updates, it seems like, continually, but it's been a slow process. We're getting there. I've gotten a lot of help from the DPW along the way. Greatly appreciate their support in these two pursuits that we're talking about this evening. But the signs are scheduled for installation. Barlow is doing the installation, and a reminder that we're using funds from the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development to help us create a designated technology area, designated business park. My efforts are trying to turn around a outdated office park into something that's more of a place to be sought after, and we are filling up space, as you know. So signage is seems to be a sensible next step, and we'll see two separate master signs go up at either end, and then some of the sign toppers. So you may not see something happen for another month and a half or so, but we are scheduled. So I just wanted to share that. And we're probably going to have a ribbon cutting with it, too. Yeah.
Thanks,
So.
Lisa.
Right. Thank you,
That's
Lisa.
it.
Appreciate
Okay.
that.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay. All right, moving on, we have just a bid award for DPW season materials. In the packet, you have the items listed. There are 9 items listed, and also there's a sheet that shows the price for the previous year. I don't know if you want me to just walk through them, or if you just want to take it as presented. The first one being the seal, crack sealing. There were 2 bids submitted. The low bid was Superior Seal Coat at $8.84 a gallon. It's 3 cents less than the prior year by the other company that bid, which was Seal Coating. The second one was the traffic markings. There were 3 bids submitted. The low bidder for the projected utilization of traffic markings was Markings, Inc. Again, that's a different bidder than the third bidder. K5 was the low bidder the previous year, and the prices were, in close proximity to where they were a year ago. There was some movement on a couple of the components of that. The third one being the vertical granite curbing. 3 bidders on that. Again, the low bidder, I'm sorry, 4 bidders. The low bidder was Detour Construction at $45, which is $1 above the prior year per foot by Allied Paving at that time, as we finished this year, this month. The next item was item number 4, paving. There were, as you can see, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bidders there. The low bid was by Newport Construction. Last year's low bidder was P.J. Albert. You can see Newport bid less than that and less than, for example, on the first one, the bituminous concrete excavation by Cole Planer at 99 cents. I mean, a year ago, we paid $1.75. For the type 1 bituminous in place, $77. When you look at the aggregate, last year it was 66, and you can see how the prices have slightly inched up on that. And then adjustment castings to grade, 137.46. We were 170 this past year. So again, when you aggregate the total, Newport was the lowest. When you then move to item 5, which was bituminous concrete in place, there were 5 bids. The low bid there is Allied Paving at $107.50 per ton. A year ago it was Sunshine Paving at $105 per ton. At item number 6, bituminous concrete top and binder course, 4 bids there. The low bid was Aggregate Industries at $67 per ton. A year ago it was Aggregate Industries at $65 per ton. Moving on to item number 7, bituminous concrete handwork. You can see that there were 7 bidders there. The low bid was by Newport Construction at $119 per ton. A year ago, it was Allied Paving at $124 per ton. And then item number 8, bituminous concrete berm in place. There were 6 bidders. The low bid was by Newport at $375. Last year's low bidder was EJ Paving. I'm sorry, EJ Paving, the one above it, at $435 per ton. And then the final one is removal and reset granite curbing. There were 4 bids there. The lowest was by Detour Construction at $24 per ton.
So a few years ago, didn't we have somebody challenge what we awarded on this? Because it might have been on the one where we have...
Yeah, and that was unsuccessful. I do remember that bid protest, and that was unsuccessful.
We're not expecting anything like that.
Yeah, we didn't have. I think what's different is we have...
What was challenged?
It was determined that there was no irregularities with the bid. What's different is Newport's a new entry into this market in the last 2 years, and you can see they've been rather aggressive this year.
Yeah, and that number 4, they look like such an outlier.
Yeah.
It's almost, did they read the
Yeah.
requirements?
Yeah, and they put a bid bond and
Yeah.
everything else, so.
Okay.
Anyway, we would request your approval as submitted for the upcoming calendar year.
I'll make a motion that we approve the DPW Materials and Services bid awards as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to my report, the first one is the goals update. I apologize at the outset that the summary that was in the packet didn't correspond perfectly with the numerical summary of the goals that were adopted back in August. They started out well, and then they went a little adrift, but the...
And there's also a couple missing.
Couple,
So what
yeah,
I
there were-
suggested
yeah.
to Paul is we'll go through what's in the packet, and then I'll go back to the ones that were missing from our original document, and we can just kind of head check where we're going with those.
All right, and the first one was sewer capacity, addressing the sewer capacity and establishing options and recommendations. And as the board's aware, the capacity report was completed by Weston and Sampson in September, as noted in the goal statement of initial report by 9/27. And then since that time, as was noted in the report, and since then, is we've reached out to neighboring communities, and we'll continue to do that annually in terms of additional capacity. Inflow and infiltration investigations have been reconfigured in order to examine the highest potential areas first. The sewer use regulations were revised to incorporate the moratorium language. As noted even earlier this evening, we're monitoring monthly flows, and most importantly, as projects now go before the planning board or Board of Appeals, the sewer flow issue is analyzed and reported in terms of the existing flows for the previous use or current use at a site and projected flows in the moratorium.
So, Paul,
Yeah.
I have an orientation question. All of these slides say goal status completed 12/20/21, regardless of whether the goal is completed or not. So that's just indicating the status date on the slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so like on this one, the last two are really ongoing things, right?
Yep.
And the question I was left with here is we say the potential for the goal was the need to look at the current sewer connection moratorium along with the needs or potential for expanded capacity and to look at short, medium, and long-term options. So it seems like what we still need to kind of work through on this one is the longer term, and is there a potential for expanded capacity, or even if they carry over into other fiscal years, what are the actions that need to be put in place with Lowell and with the state or the legislators, right? Because those are two parallel paths. The moratorium is in place until we figure out whether or not there's another solution. I think that's...
Yeah, and the problem is there doesn't appear to be any action by the city or the state in terms of any shorter or intermediate level solutions. What we are doing, and not noted here, is we are working on one of the grants with NIMCOG on the District Local Technical Assistance Grants in terms of identifying the capacity constraints on the vacant properties on 129.
So is what we're saying that the long-term options or recommendations is that we continue with the moratorium
Yeah, in fact,
year
we're not-
after year, or because I thought when we set this goal, part of it was I understand that, at least to articulate, like, what has to happen over time with Lowell or the state. Nothing's going to happen. You're saying nothing's going to happen for years.
No, what we're saying with Lowell is the Lowell plant has been over capacity 2 out of the last 4 years.
Right.
The DEP has taken no action, and the city of Lowell has taken no action in terms of expansion of the plant. What the focus has been on and continues to be on is on the combined sewer overflow, which is treating of the raw sewage during storm events into the river. But there's no focus, no attention, no effort on expanding that plant. And quite frankly, it's landlocked, so it's going to be quite a challenge in Lowell. And as we've noted in the report, it doesn't affect just Chelmsford, it affects Tingsboro, it affects Drake, and it affects Lowell. So again, I think we're all open to potential solutions. The problem is there just doesn't seem to be any attention being gathered to this as much as we keep ringing the bell here in Chelmsford and having discussions with consulting engineers and with the delegations, elected officials, whether it be the congressional or state level. Nobody, and all we hear about in terms of the infrastructure bill is combined sewer overflow. And I am working this also at the Middlesex 3 level because it's an issue that affects the growth of the region. In terms, and in fact, we are talking about having a symposium or some discussion in terms of infrastructure capacity in the region, and in addition to workforce structure needs, the infrastructure capacity in the region for, because of the constraint that it has. And why this is important is that the governor's priority in the legislature is for additional housing. We're talking about housing choice and housing growth in these MBTA communities guidelines. Well, how can you construct housing if you don't have the infrastructure to support it, particularly in terms of water and sewer infrastructure? But we're stymied. I don't know other way to describe it in terms of sewer. And so I think the word moratorium is going to go away. It's just going to be, this is the town's sewer capacity.
Wasn't there a discussion at one point where the DPW was doing an assessment of possible sites in town for a treatment plant, and then there was supposed to be some follow-up on that?
Yeah, and that was in the report, but there was no direction by this board, and I'm not going out there doing sites in anybody's neighborhood because the backflash that's going to give. Everybody wants sewer, nobody wants this treatment plant in their neighborhood. And so, yes, in the Weston and Sampson report, it talked about potential areas, one of which was the UMass West campus, if you remember, in the presentation. Well, that obviously is not going to happen.
My recollection
And
was
the other one-
there was like a significant cost to do the assessment, I
Exactly.
think, Ken,
It was like 6 figures,
just to do the assessment.
the assessment. And then the problem with Southwell was the EPA won't allow you to discharge into the river anymore. So that ruled Southwell out because of the water table. So now those were the two key components of
Bless you.
identified in that report. There were a few other sites, but,
Bless you.
you know, but no, that's why there's been no effort in terms of looking inside the town, in terms of relocating a wastewater treatment plant. I think at that time we had discussed about a regional facility with Tingsboro and Westford and so forth. Again, you want to talk about trucks? You think you have a problem with commercial trucks? The treatment plant brings trucks and it brings smell, and nobody wants either one of them.
Well, what does it mean for the town? Because my understanding is there still hasn't even been a private septic system approved in the town for any new developments or anything.
No, the planning board's approved septic. Groton Road has septic.
No, but it's got to get through Board of Health.
I believe they signed off on, and also they've been dabbling on Dunstable Road with septic as well. But
So that's the solution is private
yeah,
septic. And
we're in the same situation as Westford or other towns at this point, or in areas of Tewksbury and other places that don't have sewer at this point.
Okay.
So I think it just might be worth, like, so that we don't keep reinventing the wheel in the future, just like documenting some of that in bullet form on here.
Okay.
The other thing too that you should probably address is any of these neighborhoods that do put in a private septic get permanent grandfather. Because what are you going to do when if capacity does open up down the road? You're going to then say to them, you got to tie in.
Well, no, and here's the problem with capacity. And this would have been a problem with the West Campus, is it's not just the capacity at the treatment plant. You've got to have capacity in the pump stations and the pipes to get from the existing site to the treatment plant.
Right.
And that would have been considerable at West Campus, because you would have had to redo that whole pump station. And now if we're going to look at additional capacity to the Lowell plant, you're going to have to look at the infrastructure both within Chelmsford and within Lowell to get to the plant. And that's what just makes it so ridiculously cost prohibitive. It's not just, expand the plant. Is there
any
we know that
protection?
would have happened at the West Campus.
But someone who puts in, you mentioned Dunstable Road, that's I would assume like a 30-year septic system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there any protection to them in 15 years if the town comes in and says, now you got to tie in? If, let's say those capacities do get upgraded over the next 15 or 20 years.
I don't see that happening, but anything can happen.
Yeah.
You know. I think I just don't see it happening in the real future. I mean, if you started today and wanted to permit a wastewater treatment plant, you're at least 10 years out, just by the time you do the permitting approval and funding and construction and operation to get there. So I just don't see anything in the intermediate future.
And these surrounding communities aren't looking aggressively at infiltration or anything else to try to
No, I mean,
offset all the stormwater and everything
right.
else.
The only one who has the ability to do infiltration is Lowell, and they're just hamstrung by the cost. And again, that's
It just
mostly
seems
been
like
stormwater.
if they look at that, that would be the,
Right,
it feels like it would be the shortest path
right,
to freeing up capacity.
yeah.
Shortest time path.
Shortest time path, but
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's.
Yep, I know.
The other question is, what capacity would you need? I mean, clearly we're in a mood right now where people don't want development, okay? In terms of residential and so forth, and the biggest user of capacity is residential development. And so I'm not sure if we had a solution that the townspeople would rush to embrace it if it meant that you were going to get higher density development in town. I think, at least not in the near future, I think people have had their fill, as we've seen, for example, one of the uses on Mercury site on Riverneck Road was residential, and that, that's not popular right now. So, and it's unclear what the commercial uses are. But again, we're running those numbers with the grant, but I don't know that you could generate enough, capacity to justify the whole-scale investment you'd have for a treatment plant.
No, I don't think so either.
All right, so we'll put some more documentation on that. The second goal was the sewer lessons learned. There's a separate sheet that accompanies this in terms of the root cause analysis of the process that brought us to where we are with the current sewer capacity. As noted in the separate sheet, and again, we summarized it on the goals sheet, we looked at 7 major developments in town over the past 8 years regarding sewer capacity approvals. What we found is they're really, we're lacking in interdepartmental communication concerning the major development projects. The existing and proposed sewer flows were not formally presented to the regulatory permitting boards, such as the Planning Board and Board of Appeals. I think the thinking at the time was that 40B affordable housing projects, we had to approve their connections anyway because the town had remaining capacity. So the systems that are in place for the future is, and I've seen this, in practice is, notification goes out now on any major impact on any type of capacity in terms of sewer, water capacity, school capacity, and so forth. We now have an enhanced internal permitting system that flags and requires notice and approvals. And then, but more importantly is there are interdepartmental meetings in which representatives of all the land use boards as well as the applicable water district gather to review the impacts on the proposed projects. That happened most recently last week regarding River Neck Road. It's obviously happened with the UMass West Campus development. It happened in the center for Grist Mill too, and it meets that. So if there's something going on, it's being noted. And it happened even on the Route 40 project. So the particular water district is at the table. These issues are identified. I think as we learned from National Grid, they're pretty confident that they have the the natural gas and electrical components addressed. We're mindful of the water constraints as well as school issues and sewer issues. So I think we learned from it, and certainly if we had to do it over again, it would have been handled differently. So
So Paul, is this, what you just outlined, is that like documented as a process or policy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we have.
How's it institutionalized?
There were 2 efforts. One was there was a formal list that was developed for a planning board project.
Okay.
That was basically 3 pages long. Evan submitted it to the planning board, and they've kind of set it aside. So what we're doing internally is anything that comes in, the notice goes out through the building department and community development in terms of, okay, you name it, commercial project, significant residential project, the notice goes out, the input's there, it's provided, there's, checklist, and that's the means that we have at this point in time is a notification project and pre-construction meetings.
Yeah, all I was asking is, like, at the bottom, it says improvements to this process will be ongoing.
Yeah.
So is this a documented process that says this is what shall happen?
Yeah, and again, it really drives out of community development. That's where it all pivots around because the land use boards are hosting that in terms of building, permit, engineering, DPW, and so forth. And
Okay.
goal number 3 was the Warren Pole Farm development plan and conservation restriction. As noted there, we've done a lot of the field work. The perimeter survey was completed by the conservation, by the DPW for the Conservation Commission. Most recently, there was a notice of intent filed for the parking lot and access driveway. Signage has been audited and received. We're now in the DEP's 30-day review period. prior to DPW being able to address their work in the parking lot. And where it stands in terms of the conservation restriction, the Conservation Commission has drafted it. It's been submitted to the Land Trust for review. And hopefully after the first of the year, that will resume and it can then be agreed upon and then submitted to the state for review and then implemented.
So Paul, when we had originally set this goal, in terms of the time frame, we said that we wanted to be ready to submit to the state by December 20th, which is today, recognizing that it had to go through the Land Conservation Trust. So have we gotten any indication from them yet, or we're
in the information I've received from Carl Bischoff and Dave McLaughlin is they think they're real close.
Okay,
There's
good.
only a couple unresolved issues that need to hopefully get remedied, and it should go.
So hopefully the first month or two of the new year.
I'm hoping it's a matter of weeks at this
Okay,
point in time.
great, thank you.
Number 4 was the fire stations. In terms of the establishment of the committee and picking up from there in terms of, the future of engines in stations 3, 4, and 5. I guess the summary on this one is the committee was composed and established. You folks did the selection committee process for the committee. The first committee meeting was held last week. Officers were elected. And right now, we're in the process of committee goals and the process forward. Our next immediate steps, we're going to go toward the existing stations. We're also, from there, going to, again, agree upon a goals and process for that, and then get into the report. We've established, it was a great suggestion, great first meeting, a common repository of a shared drive where all the materials can be reviewed and maintained. And I'm optimistic that the work will begin in earnest with the new year, and hopefully in a matter of months we'll agree upon a shared set of data and go from there. Related to that, I think the other good thing is as of today, Station 2 is occupied, and they're now responding from Station 2. The final communication things should be ironed out tonight or tomorrow morning. But and I think that, serves as a clear demonstrated ability on how a town can frugally and successfully renovate an existing firehouse and perhaps offers us a pathway forward in terms of the facilities aspect. But there's more to this study than just the facility. It's also the apparatus. It's also the staffing and location of the stations. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add to that, Virginia. Okay. Number 5 was the PFAS on Richardson Road. Again, we got an update on this tonight. The evaluation of the PFAS issues and response plan. And as the board's aware, the response action plan was submitted back in October. It was accepted by DEP November 10th. We are moving forward with the actions of the plan. There's a pre-construction site walk took place out there. As Steve noted, they're out there identifying the locations for the additional wells and soil borings. We're on schedule, which, as Steve noted, is going to be a tight window, and we're hoping that we don't get into any lead time issues in terms of, anything that would hinder the construction. Where it's going to be housed is, first of all, the temporary fire station after the first of the year will be removed. It'll probably take a week or two to get it out of there and disconnect everything. But where that station was, if you know that garage building that's right next to it, the permanent garage building, that's where the treatment system is going to be housed in those first 2 bays there. The goal is to, meet the time frames and have that system operational when the weather improves in the springtime. And there was also a filing and publication of the Tier 1, Phase 1, tier report, which is required under any release. So that's happened as well. So it's so far, we're on schedule and on the ball, and I think, we're anxious to get the system running, particularly now when we see the anxiety at at the Chelmsford Water District with Crooked Spring. Unfortunately, so far, the levels at the North Chelmsford Water District are not at the threshold levels. In fact, as Steve noted his report, they actually slightly went down the last quarterly sampling. So we're real sensitive to the concerns and out there, and hopefully we'll continue to stay on. And Paul McKinley's done a great job and has stayed on top of it. So next item was number 6, which is the ARPA funds. As you know, we're in the sorry, it's not on the list.
Session planning.
I went on to 13. I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2 lists. Number 13 was the goal succession planning. Which was implementing a succession plan for major town staff positions and consider areas of the core competencies and gap analysis. As was noted previously, the grant was received from the Collins Center at UMass Boston to assist in developing the succession plan. Orientation was held with department heads just almost 2 weeks ago, and those discussions with senior staff are taking place now and will continue into the new month of January, and basically delivering this plan by springtime. So it's it seems to be on time and on mark, with an experienced consultant that has done these plans for other towns. Next one was number 12, which was the cybersecurity vigilance in terms of continuing efforts to protect the town's IT infrastructure. This one, we're a little vague for security purposes in terms of reporting everything. So if it seems like it's vague, it's deliberately meant to be vague. But what we can report is we have done cybersecurity vigilance on our email and cloud data, regarding multi-factor authentication, sufficient backup and filtering, antivirus software, and training of employees, most importantly. We're in the midst of an initial round. We're also applied for a grant for a new round of state offered cybersecurity training. And we're also checking the security of our vendors who provide support systems for the town. And the quarterly, so it appears to be on track, and it appears to be a comfort level with our IT director. And in due course of time, we'll do another external analysis of the system to make sure that that there's another set of eyes looking upon us.
So if the items Office 365 through antivirus software implemented and the multi-factor authentication, most of those are not new since August, right? A lot of that was already in place.
Some of it was in place. Some of the filtering is greater now.
Okay.
So when we go onto the site, we get this pause that basically says before they're landing you, they're checking the authenticity of the site. Also new since August is when emails come in, they're flagged.
Okay.
Again, they sound like things that have been in place for a couple of years, but they've, that they're
up in the game on them.
Exactly.
So when we had set this, we had talked about quarterly reporting in this forum, and this says quarterly reviews with the town manager. So what do you recommend?
I guess it's what you prefer. If there's going to be any review in this forum, we would do it under executive session.
Okay.
We do it in executive session because it is one of the allowable purposes for an executive session, and we don't want to be doing security discussions.
I just wanted to clarify with the board and with you, because it was, when we put the objective dates, and we said by June of 22 with quarterly reporting, which I assumed was with this group.
Or do you want a representative of the board to meet quarterly outside of this? It's whatever you prefer.
It's whatever the board wants, I don't.
Because that's another way, is we could have a member of the board meet with the IT director, me, and such quarterly. And then if there's a concern, we could bring the whole board into I guess I'll leave it to you.
I mean, we all set the goal together, so.
Yeah, no, you can just throw it on with when we have an executive session as a.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
As an add-on. I wouldn't do a special
Not a
executive session.
special executive session,
Okay.
but just put it in there. Okay, that's a good idea.
Okay. Fits, okay. Next one is number 6, the ARPA funds. But there was again, establishing a process for receiving input on, identifying, prioritizing uses of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, responsible individuals and roles, implementation. Again, as the board knows, this is rather current. We went out and promoted the availability and submission of funds for initial submittals. Those were submitted last meeting. You're having a work session on January 3rd to review the initial submittals. And again, this is a process that's going to go on, in the months and probably the next couple of years in terms of available, reserves and funding as we move through this process. So, as we know, the state was delayed in its approval. They finally enacted its first phase of its ARPA plan last month, and they're scheduled to do a second phase in the months ahead. Like I said, we've got a busy meeting in January in terms of review and then holding reserves for future needs as they arise. The next one was COVID, number 7, COVID recurrence preparation. Preparing the critical factors to be acted on should negative pandemic trends escalate, and the actions that would be taken to recurrence surge. I guess we're in the midst of that right now. And again, it's really pivoting around the health department. Our emergency plan's been in place. I think, as we've noted these last few meetings, they've really have stepped up the issues of the booster clinics, in conjunction with their annual flu clinics for vaccinations. They are tracking trends. We had a safety discussion this morning amongst department heads. I know it's on the agenda of every Board of Health meeting. The efforts are going in terms of communication with the schools, the state. As you can see, it's very fluid. The state has suspended contact tracing, for example, most recently. They're giving out free test kits, but yet we were not included in the first round of the free test kits distribution. We'll see how that moves in the months ahead, particularly as they identify what the next phases are, particularly, the school, for example, the school mask mandate expires in January in a few weeks. We expect that will be extended. And again, we continue to communicate by our website and social media. At this point, it remains in the hands. The governor has not imposed another state of emergency or any state mandates. And so issues like face mask requirements and so forth are at the local level. As we saw, the mayor of Boston did another effort today. Lowell did one last week. Board of Health is not meeting until after the first of the year. And we have ample protective equipment. And then the other one that was sort of misaligned with that is we've done obviously a lot of work on the HVAC in the schools and so forth, which was another whole sheet that was out of line in terms of the order, but that's sort of where we are with COVID. The next one was number 8, resident communications, in terms of identifying and implementing ways to improve communication with residents. Just haven't gotten to that. Haven't been able to figure out how to do it, and certainly haven't, with everything else going on, have had the means to sort through what that would be in terms of how we can improve. And again, that was a June goal.
Right, that's what I was gonna say, that we set this for June.
Yep.
As a joint goal. So I guess I'd just like to get some input from the board. Maybe first quarter of the year, do we put this on for a working discussion on one of our agendas to talk about where we want to go with it?
Good.
I'm thinking maybe January is probably going to be pretty full, but maybe February, March time frame, we can see what the end of January looks like. But I think we have to at least start having a discussion if we're going to hit a June target. So, okay.
The next one was the minutes, refining and documenting the.
You want to
select
talk
board
to that,
minute
Mark?
Yep. So what we have done is I've codified some of the direction that we kind of put together back in the spring and early summer timeframe for public minutes. So that's been kind of put together, and essentially that's been being run out now for about 6 months. Seems to be working fairly well. So I've documented that section for the public minutes. For the executive minutes, that's also been drafted. However, one of our goals there was to try to streamline a little bit of that process for executive session minutes and try to find ways to capture all the votes and so forth in a way that doesn't start to require minutes for minutes, type of a process, which was in place and currently still is in place. So that has been drafted. I do have some questions left on that I've actually been working with Paul on to make a couple of tweaks to that. And I'm also looking at the audit of held minutes and how that may be fitted into this particular process. But that's about the end of it. And then it'll be ready for a draft document that I can share with everybody, and we can, make additional comments, edits, et cetera, from that point. So what I'm trying to do is at least get this documented so that future boards, ourselves, or whatever, can use that as the baseline to make additional changes, improvements, as interpretations or, approaches are changing. So that's really the whole intent of doing this, so.
So if we're going to be reviewing that in January, then what is the timeline that we want to set for Part B of this, which is the policy that we establish and roll out to the boards and committees? That was the second part of the discussion we had.
Well, this is just for select board.
I understand. That's
all I've
part
been
part
doing.
A.
I haven't even looked at that yet.
No, I know you haven't looked at it.
Personally, yeah.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
kind of update what's the goalpost.
Yeah,
So-
I don't know. I think we got to sit down and talk about, I think the first thing we would have to do is actually kind of audit what the gaps are that are out there right now, because I have no idea what they are. I just know that when I went looking for minutes and so forth, that they weren't around.
Right, I think there's two pieces. One is the gap part, but the other is the policy is independent of that, really. I mean, it's what do we have to do to be, as a municipality, to be compliant? And
Yeah,
so we
it's- yeah.
know there's areas of non-compliance, and we know there's also opportunities for education.
Yeah, that
So,
can be,
and-
that can be pretty straightforward.
Right, so
I
that-
mean,
that-
that's not
that-
going to be a big stretch from what we have for our public minutes piece, I don't think.
And I think Attorney Haverty already took a pass at that earlier, a few months ago, so we would be able to maybe refine that and at least get a policy in place, and with that in parallel, also look at what the gaps are.
Yeah, the gaps are going to be a big piece. That-
I mean, the open meeting law specifies the requirement of when
Right,
minutes have
the
to be available.
policy is straightforward,
Yeah,
because
right.
it is the
What-
requirements are the requirements. There's not a whole lot of deliberation about that.
I mean,
Right, but those requirements have been in place for some time. and-
Right, but what we said was we were going to document them and flow them out.
No, I get that.
Okay.
I mean, I've been keeping an eye on what I call the major land use boards in terms of their timeliness of their minutes, and they're pretty good in terms of like
Yeah.
planning board, board of
Yeah, they
appeals,
are,
and so
yeah.
forth.
Some
I mean,
are
those-
great, yeah.
Those are big ones. I mean,
Right.
yeah, you tend to get less on some of the non-statutory committees who are, relying on, don't have the staff to help them prepare the minutes, and that's the big challenge. Conservation Commission's fine, they've got Vivian doing their minutes, the planning board's fine, Board of Appeals, they have staff doing it. It's when you start going to like the Historical Commission and then their part-time person walks away and then we can't find anybody, that's when the problems start happening, because it's just, you're dependent on volunteers who are only, who.
No, I get it.
It's a big.
So just from a draft standpoint, would like the end of February be reasonable just for the policy part of it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
I think that would be fine. Because I think it'll probably come out of this. And
Yeah, okay. Okay, Paul, then we
Okay,
have
the next one was number 10, which was the public works infrastructure. That other one on the school HVAC really was the COVID one, and it got, misnumbered and placed in there, but the public works infrastructure in terms of conducting the listening sessions to identify and inform the issues regarding traffic, sidewalks, bike access, improving resident safety and quality of life. Well, obviously, as we all know, those occurred. In the packet this evening is the summary, a status report on the concerns raised from the listening sessions. There are some open items that we're not losing sight of. We're bringing that into the Traffic Safety Committee, like notably the issue of truck exclusion routes and so forth. So we're addressing those items. The next part.
So let's just pause there for a minute. So for that part, does anybody have any questions on the listening session summaries that were in the packet? I think the traffic committee did a nice job of explaining things in a little more detail. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Okay. Yeah.
So part B.
Yeah, but just before we leave that, I wanted the board to know is we're still working those open-ended items, and in fact, I'm still trying to work with Congresswoman Trahan's office of getting some kind of a meeting with the, after the first of the year to try to see if we can get some, and working with NIMCOG as well, trying to get some additional resources to assist us with some of the difficult challenges there. In terms of the second part of that was prioritize plan for road infrastructure improvements initiative. As noted in the report, the technical work is nearing completion in terms of the, draft pave work has been completed with the outside vendor. We're expecting the first week of the year to have the final pavement management report in those assets. And what I see happening is that we'll have a prioritization plan and discussion probably in February where we come in with the maps that show the existing streets, the sidewalks, the road conditions, and just sort of have a discussion and get input from the community in terms of where do the next investments go in terms of the upcoming seasons, in terms of road resurfacing, sidewalk construction. And I think sort of the first purview towards that, in same metric will be this truck exclusion discussion. Same thing. What are the constraints in terms of the truck exclusion routes, because we know the guidelines, we can't do numbered routes and so forth, and then we sort of show what's left and then show what may be possible. And again, the same thing will happen with the road infrastructure. Here's our existing assessment, these are our existing sidewalks, this is the plan for the next 3 to 5 years in terms of road investments in the community.
Is the analysis that they're doing, they're including the suggestions or the requests that came up during the listening sessions too, so at least folks will understand how they're dispositioned?
Well, the condition is a condition report. I mean, what that's going to show is,
No, I know, but the prioritization report, I
Right.
thought.
Right, exactly. That will be the discussion that we'll undertake in this forum, and again,
Okay.
public, in terms of where, is it schools, is it particular neighborhoods and so forth. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. And then the other part was the consent order, as Steve Yonley spoke earlier. The consent order has been executed, and the initial phases of the plan were submitted, and now we're addressing the issues towards compliance.
Any questions on that one? Okay, I'm just going to go back to our original list, which I have called up on the screen. It's not in the packet, just to talk about the ones that were not in this one, because this is the only time we really have to talk about these as a board. So number 11 was the growth strategy, which we had set in January to June, and this was to, I'll just read it in case you don't have it in front of you. To work with the Select Board, Planning Board, Finance Committee, School Committee, businesses, residents, and other stakeholders to establish a clearer understanding of the desired growth strategy for the town. And what we had said was we were going to maybe try to have a kickoff discussion with the 4 boards at the beginning of the year. And I just want to do a head check on whether that is still the path that we want to be on. I think the other thing for consideration is that at our work session, Paul's working with Katie on getting a proposal to look at the strategic planning overall for the town. And,
Katie Gilfeather,
from
in
the
terms of
offsite?
the
I'm
strategic
sorry.
planning, and she promises us that we'll have a proposal by the first of the year for
And I know this seems to be causing confusion when boards and committees talk about it amongst themselves, although I know, like, Paul went and explained to the planning board what we had in mind there. I wonder if our energy is better spent on the strategic plan, because the growth strategy for a town that's built out seems also to be something that is, like, we don't understand yet what's in the master plan. That's more of a land use thing in terms of development growth strategy.
Yeah, and it was discussed that the revisions of the master plan doesn't call for a strategy in terms of development.
Oh, it doesn't?
No. And, you know, and so they.
This is,
That's what should be driving it, right? Yeah.
I know I was kind of the outlier when this came up. I think it's a subset of overall strategy, so it's a question of whether.
Yeah,
What
we're
do
trying
we
to get the
focus
horse
on?
back in front of the cart, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So what I'm looking for is guidance from the board, because we have we have the potential initial discussion with Katie Gilfeather on strategic planning. And then we have this where we said we were going to try to schedule something with 4 boards. And if we're going to go forward with that, it's going to take some planning to get a date on the calendar.
I mean, I just think there's so much going on right now. I don't know that we can say we can do it in 2 months or 4 months or what.
Yeah, I see like March as the first opportunity to even think about it.
I'm sort of with your comment of, in a town that's pretty well built out, how deep of a growth strategy are we going to get, especially as Paul had said earlier in the meeting, with the community's sentiment about, you know, where growth in this town should be going seems not to be in favor right now. It's probably something we could delay a little bit longer with everything else we have going on.
Okay.
Do we still want to try to schedule something with Katie when she's ready after the first of the year to talk about strategic planning?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and that would take a higher priority than this, is what, is that what we're
Yeah,
saying?
because I think in general, a lot of people look at growth as Riverneck, 9, Acton,
Right, I don't-
downtown. I think that's what a lot of people look at it as, and I think they're wondering, you know, I mean, I think we're all wondering why, you know,
Well, and
what's driving some of the decisions to do some of those things or not do them.
And I think too, like when this was set, one of the examples that was given was the UMass West campus, and wouldn't it be great if we had a strategy in place to help guide that? Well, we just can't get this fast enough.
Right.
Okay, and then the other one that was missing from this was number 14, which was the town common and its extension plans, and this is, overall, it was to develop conceptual candidates for improving the community from the town common through North Road and the historic district. And the objective that we set was to conduct listening sessions with the public, the boards and the committees to gauge interest in the 4th quarter. So I can leave that on here for now, and we can see where we are in our next quarterly review, if we still think it's something we can absorb and fit in.
I think it is, but I think maybe, I don't know how to do it, but I don't want any of the other committees in town to think that we're, like, taking over their goal. Like, I don't want the Center
Their
Village,
charter.
you know, master planning committee to say, hey, what are they up to, you know?
Well, I think the intent was for them to be part of that discussion, right?
Right, but I think I know that it's already been heard that we were thinking about doing it, and we got to clue them in on what we're doing. You know, I mean, the goal is laid out there, but I don't think anybody knows, so people are like, well,
right now
what are you doing? What are you?
Right now, nothing.
But there should be some communication to them that this is what we're thinking down the road, because I've already gotten feedback that, hey, what are you guys doing? What are you up to? Are you trying to, so.
We'll tell them to watch our meetings, and they'll find out.
I'll tell them Pat said to call her.
There you go. Want my number?
Oh,
I
I
have
got
it.
the same feedback, but it was couched to me in terms of what a town employee had told them about what the select board was doing, so.
Can't believe everything you hear.
It's probably Pat? No.
All right. So we'll work on that. And then the other one that was missing was the select board policies, but Pat's gonna talk about that tonight, so. Does anybody have anything else on goals? Okay,
Okay, just wrapping up, we just touched upon the status of the listening session, so that's, again, that's available.
oh, I'm
And again,
sorry, Paul, I didn't realize.
The
it
next
was a
item was,
separate-
no, that's fine, and they, again, we've got the open items that we're keeping active. Just a couple things just to quickly touch upon, and it was carryover from the previous agenda. We did receive a $9,800 grant from Maya on safety in terms of rooftop guardrails and skylight safety grates to avoid, falling through skylights. So that work will take place in the months ahead. In terms of the state ARPA and surplus funding legislation update, the good news is since our last meeting, this governor did sign the legislation, again, allocating the initial portion of the state's ARPA funding and the fiscal year 21 state budget surplus. The most noteworthy from this for Chelmsford is the $350,000 that George outreached for the water district, North Chelmsford Water District was included. And again, we want to recognize Senator Barrett's office that got that included in the Senate side, the $350,000. And I notified, the district's aware of it, obviously, the Senator Barrett's office sent information out. I communicated with Bruce Harper and basically said they should be getting contacted soon directly from the administration in terms of how they can access those funds. Because as the board's aware from our discussions, that they're quickly going to be doing those new filters and work at the plant to, again, stay ahead of the PFAS. And then the other part was the $200,000 that was included for park improvements in Chelmsford. So that's good news. And then, as we said, we're expecting there's going to be another round of infrastructure and state surplus ARPA, probably in the January, February timeframe, probably February, where the legislature's been. They've sort of have slipped a little bit with their guidelines, but it's very clear that they intend to come back with a final package. So again, if there's opportunities, I'll notify you, or again, if you have suggestions in terms of funding initiatives and support that the town could achieve, let me know and let us know.
Paul?
Yeah,
Excuse
yes,
me.
George.
The 200 that's going to Varney, right?
If that's what the board decides, yeah. I mean, it's the select board is going to direct it.
Well, I mean,
it said
I
park,
thought it
it's-
was.
I think it was there, I think
It was already awarded by Golden or something.
yeah, the funding's there and it's been included and been appropriated.
all right.
But we haven't committed it for, I think the intent was for Varney, but the board hasn't taken a formal vote, and we haven't really directed it in terms of
All right.
what to do at Varney. But I think, George, as we've known over the years, we've always looked at doing something with that baseball field.
Well, we mentioned that, but then tonight you started talking about like another playground for the kids.
Right, the fitness park, but that would come
No,
from
not the
CPC.
fitness thing, just
Oh,
for
no,
friends.
but previously town meeting voted to, the wooden playground over
Yeah,
there.
right.
That's been previously approved at town meeting for funding. The problem is, and Brian Creamer was on from up in that neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
the problem is because of the supply issues, they're short a little bit of funding.
Yeah.
And so we may have to go back to CPC for additional funding, because the neighborhood wants to expand the size, the components of the playground. And then he mentioned some drainage concerns as well up there, so. But in terms of the 200,000, nothing's going to be touched until it comes back before this board, in terms of what to use it for. But I know, George, you and I have worked in this issue for about a decade, and I think an effort is that field surface itself hasn't been touched, and needs attention.
I was just curious.
Yeah. But no, I think we can probably have some discussions on that with the board in the weeks ahead, and so when the ground weather breaks in the spring, maybe we can get going on that. But I do know that was when we've been dealing with those issues over the period of time.
See, I thought all that money was approved, the same as like the 350 that was all.
Yeah, it's been approved. The
That's all been
200,000's approved.
Okay.
We just got to decide.
Okay.
So my
Select board.
recollection is there was a $200,000 request for Varney in the ARPA funds.
Yes.
And the last time we had a discussion was we were going to, when we have that work session on January 3rd, we were going to talk about the money coming in from the earmark
And they may be
Right,
complementary.
Right,
Yeah.
and whether, right,
Right.
whether we can just allocate that.
No problem, I just,
And it was, the discussion was mostly about Varney, you're right.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then the last item I want to talk about is the fiscal '22 Planning Assistant Grant for Climate Action. I'm not going to walk you through this whole thing, but the bottom line is, about 6 months ago, Evan submitted an application to the fiscal year '22 Planning Assistance Grants Program, and really, the initiatives were related to climate preparedness and resiliency. So we're now going to sort of move this to the new Climate Sustainability Commission and really look at how this can help in terms of the development principles in town, in terms of the aspects of being prepared. And we know that a big chunk of this ARPA and infrastructure funding from the state is going with climate change and addressing the impacts of climate change. So this is really great that we've got $30,000 of planning assistance, to address best management practices, low impact design, and so forth. So that's great news. The last thing I have is appointments for the Holiday Decorating Committee. When we submitted this, 4 of the 5 people have re-upped. So I'd seek your approval for the 4. There were 5, and the 5th one actually came in, but it was after the agenda was posted, so I'll bring you the 5th member next meeting, because we didn't want to update the packet. But obviously, the Holiday Decorating Committee is not going to be very active in the next, several weeks or months. But, the 4 principals have stayed on, Eric and Vivian Merrill, Colleen Stansfield, and Sharon Smith, who, again, I've heard nothing but great comments in terms of the tree lighting in the center and the decorations. And
Agreed.
great. So I'd seek your approval to reappoint them for the term ending December 31st, 2022.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the town manager's appointments to the Holiday Decorating Committee as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so that brings us to the review of the liquor license policy.
Okay, I think when we left it last time, it was really, there was one major issue that we wanted to find out more about, and that was 109 on discrimination. How to include everybody there and how to make it not a laundry list. So there's 2 options here. The first on 109, no license shall be made, no licensee shall make any distinction, discrimination, or restriction relative to the admission or treatment of any person. Or the other option is, no licensee shall make any distinction or discrimination or restriction on the basis of race, color, ancestry, national origin, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic background, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, disability, military veteran status, political affiliation, or any other discriminatory reason. That has a lot in it, and probably by today there might be another one that we could add. So we can use basically either one of those. Obviously, I would go with the first one because it doesn't list specifically who we're discriminating against. It just says don't discriminate against anybody.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Much better.
So the only other question that we had when I was speaking with Christine about it, I think there was the consensus that we would enforce the TIPS certification for all the manager and employees rather than have them set up their own program. And she wanted us to think about when the enforcement of that should begin, because the police have already done all their checks and reviews for this license period, so they're not going to go back and do another one, obviously. She suggested giving them a few months to convert over if anybody needs to. A lot of them already do use the TIPS. Suggested maybe the fiscal year would be a good time to start the enforcement, and probably, for practical purposes, they wouldn't be checked again until it was time to renew a licenses, so like next October, November timeframe. So, I mean, if everybody's okay with that, rather than put something like that in the document itself and then have to go and change it after the time has passed, that would just be, what she would do going forward.
So she would send the document out as the updated policy and the comment in the cover letter that the tips.
Right, that part would
section
not be
will
enforced until the
October.
next review.
Yeah. Fine with that.
And just one other thing, when we were going over it last time, I noted that there were 2 sections that were taken word for word from our policies. So I'd just like to get basically an okay to remove those sections now from our policy so that they don't have to be updated in 2 places. And those were section 311, the closing hours, which is probably more an enforcement thing than a policy issue. And there was one other change that you had noted on that, Virginia, about how long after closing time. And the other one was 505, the supervision in a package store, about an employee being present on the floor where alcohol sales take place.
So you want to remove those from the select board policy
Correct.
document and just maintain them here?
Yes.
Okay with that? George?
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Mark?
No.
Ken?
I have no problem with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we need a vote on this?
I think a vote to approve the regulations would be good.
I'll make a motion to approve the updated liquor and common vigilant license regulations as presented tonight.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Pat.
A lot of work, thank you.
So item 14 was the meeting minutes process, and Mark already addressed that during the goals review. So let's go to item 15, which is the meeting minutes approval. The first one up is October 7th.
I'll make a motion to approve the, what's that?
Well, we've been doing them one at a time.
Okay. Yeah, I stopped because he said something, that's all.
Is it all of them?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear him. I'll make a motion to approve the October 7th meeting minutes.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
I'll make a motion to approve the October 19th regular meeting minutes as presented.
Second the motion.
I just have one correction. Obviously, I didn't catch this when I first went through it. On page 3, the 6th paragraph down, Mr. Wojcik is spelled incorrectly. Spelled right everywhere else, but missed it there.
I will make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes dated October 19th, 2021 as amended.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I will make a
Anybody have any comments on October 25th? Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from October 25th, 2021.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. November 1st, I just noticed a name correction that I had submitted that got missed. So it's on page 6, where it says Jerry Hall, Lovett Lane. Jerry in the minutes is Gerry. It should be, I'm sorry, it's Jerry, and it should be Gerry. So I would just submit that amendment.
So,
On this one, I already, again, I don't know how I didn't miss this. End of discussion about 255 Princeton Street.
What page, Pat?
It's on several pages, page 8, 9. Mark Baranski's name is spelled incorrectly. It's Baranski, not BE.
Okay, so we'll do a global fix of
It's
that.
consistent on that one, so it's several pages.
I'll make a motion to approve the select board regular meeting minutes from November 1st, 2021 as amended.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Okay, we're at liaison reports and referrals. George, do you have anything?
No, I'm not the liaison, but I was just curious about, did we resolve the situation with the Board of Health, and the extra, the 7.5 hour deal or whatever? Was just brought up the other day,
Well, you approved it at your last meeting, so for the extra hours for the existing
Yeah,
two staff
yeah.
people, yep,
Yeah, we,
from the ARPA.
Because I'm talking about at the opening of the firehouse, which that was after the meeting, right? We had already had the meeting.
I think so.
And somebody approached me that whatever, as long as it's taken care of, it's taken care of.
Close
Good.
It was very late that Monday night that we did it, and the ribbon cutting was kind of early in the morning, so maybe they didn't stay up to watch it.
Maybe.
is that it, George?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No worries. Pat?
Yeah, noticed in the paper that the cheerleaders from the local Pop Warner achieved a national award, which, congratulations for them, that's very impressive. So maybe we should do a proclamation for them, or something like that. And the only other thing is, it's our last meeting for the year, so wish everybody happy holidays and enjoy whatever holidays you choose to celebrate, and we'll be back next year.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Mark?
No, all set. Thanks.
Ken?
Just reiterate what Pat said. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. Stay safe, get vaccinated.
Okay. I have a couple from the school committee. They'd like you to know that Doran Whittier is going to be presenting at their meeting tomorrow evening to give an update on the facility study and some possible short and long-term recommendations. The planning board is going to be continuing their public hearing for the proposed zoning article for the UMass West campus on January 12th. And they're also planning to start the public hearing for the proposed redevelopment of the former Mercury computer site on River Neck Road, also on the 12th. And the Vinyl Square Strategic Action Plan Committee would like to thank everyone for their help with the concept plan and other initiatives that they undertook in 2021, and would welcome anyone's participation at their next meeting on January 6th. I don't see any press. So with that, I will take a motion.
Let's see what we got.
You need it, Ken?
Yeah, I got it. It's a long one. Let me get it. So I'll make a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss strategy with respects to litigation for the certificate of occupancy for 73 Dalton Road, strategy with respect to litigation for 69 Carlisle Street, strategy 59 Carlisle Street, strategy with respect to potential litigation on Lead Road commercial trucking, review of the executive session minutes from September 13th, October 25th, segment 1, 2, and 3, November 15th, segment 1 and 2, and November 29th.
Not to return to open.
And not to return to open session. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Pat?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And I vote aye.